there's only one other alternative, which is not to do anything. That's what you're saying?
Well, and if you don't do anything, the bridge may continue to deteriorate at some point. Right. C, the relationship between the short-term and long-term impacts of the proposed regulated activity on regulated areas and the maintenance and enhancement of long-term productivity of such areas. No direct or indirect short-term or long-term impacts on Thorn Brook are anticipated since no work is proposed in the watercourse or adjacent wetlands. Although none are anticipated, any short-term impacts would, in fact, be offset by the long-term social and safety benefits of reopening this bridge to vehicular traffic. D, irreversible and irretrievable loss of wetland or watercourse resource which could be caused by the proposed regulated activity, including extent to which such activities would foreclose a future ability to protect, enhance, or restore such resources. And in our view, no irreversible and irretrievable loss of a wetland or water course will occur if the proposed work is performed in accordance with the plans, specifications, and associated controls described in the November 24th application. E, the character and degree of injury to or interference with safety, health, or the reasonable use of the property which is caused or threatened by the proposed activity. In our view, the bridge rehab and its rehabilitation and its reopening to vehicles will improve the character and safety of this property and the surrounding properties. In addition to making the reasonable use of the property by MDC better, the bridge repair project may increase the long-term health and safety of the local residents by removing and replacing a circa 1960 bridge rail and other deck components, reopening the bridge to emergency response and other vehicles, and improve access to the dam for repairs by MDC. And finally, item F, under 10.2, impacts of the proposed regulated activity on regulated areas outside the area for which the activity is proposed, and future activities associated with or reasonably related to the proposed regulated activity, which are made inevitable by the proposed regulated activity, which may have an impact on regulated areas. We believe no measurable negative impacts will occur. They're not anticipated on the regulated wetland and watercourse areas outside of the proposed activity, including downstream.
Okay. Pretty much covers.
If there are any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise,
Okay.
thank you for your attention.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to make? Some of you were here when they first presented this. I don't know. You didn't see this probably, did you? If you weren't here at the meeting when we submitted this in the application that was submitted last at the December meeting. Was everyone else here? Maybe Dennis or you were.
I was at the initial, quite a month ago.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We require a certain amount of copies to be presented with the application.
Yeah,
Those copies ought to cover all of the commission members.
yeah.
If they're not here, there should be a copy for them.
Mhm.
And we don't have a copy for,
We don't have an extra copy for.
no, we don't, and we should have it.
Mhm.
We should have 14 copies per month, or per application. That includes a copy for the selectman as well, who's a member of this commission. A copy for the enforcement officer and a copy for the file. We should be sure we get that from now on.
I forget how many copies we did get, it was maybe 11 or something.
I thought the original application we provided 14, but on the supplemental letter, we did not provide nearly that many copies. I think we provided 1 or 2.
Actually, the supplemental letter, excuse me.
The supplemental
There was-
letter.
There was 10 on mine, I just.
Oh, okay.
And I only made that many because that's the amount of commission members that want to appear and see Willie in the back, but I could get him a copy if you would like.
Well, I think everybody that would desire a copy to help you make a decision should have one at this point. And do we have anybody that feels like they need a copy at this point that they didn't have and they can't make a decision?
I don't know if I can't make a decision, but I need a copy for your records.
Okay, for your records. All right. Anyone else? Okay. Well, this,
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the application, that we approve the application.
yeah, we already accepted. as an application. Your motion is that we approve it as submitted with any additional,
No, that's
Okay.
good.
Do we have a second?
We approve the application.
do we have a second for that?
Before we do that, what about the bonding?
Well, we can discuss. Do we have a second for that motion? Then we'll have a discussion period.
I'll second that.
Okay, Dennis seconds the motion. Discussion now. First question,
The only question is the bonding. Normally that's done by the contractor, who has not been hired yet, correct?
Correct. And the bridge is owned by MDC and the road is owned by MDC.
Right.
So I would think that the MDC would probably submit the bond check. Say yes.
We do require the contractor to submit a performance improvement bond with this contract, so if he's liable to finish the project, or someone who will hire, who will use his bond to hire someone to finish the project.
makes sense, yes and no.
Did you have a fee in mind?
A fee in mind? Usually based it on a percentage, right? Like,
Well, actually, it's usually we do like 500 or 1,000, based on what it would cost to replace the ENS controls, or the engineer could give us an amount that would cost to replace the ENS controls, and send us maybe an email to myself and the chairman, and then we would probably use that as a bond.
in this
Does that make
case,
sense?
the ENS controls are a little more complex than usual because they include that undercarriage that you can do for the bridge, right?
And that's why I would rather have him send me something, because if we said 500 or 1,000 and he comes up with 15, I'd rather go with his figure.
Yeah, I'm thinking that probably needs to be higher typical because there are more costs involved in case things do have to be replaced.
Okay, so in terms of, we're talking about bonding of the erosion and sediment control measures, including the platform, the breeze
Under
shield.
platform
And
and shield, right?
we could provide certainly Scott with a construction cost estimate for those.
Yes, and
items.
then we would do that would be part of the bonding and that cost.
And then we would use that number when you start, we get a bond from MTC for the number you specified.
So do we do a provisional acceptance?
We could do that.
Provisional on
We
the
could say
bond?
this would be to make sure that
Okay,
the bond would be based on the cost of replacing.
all right. So provisionally accepted and totally accepted after the bond has been submitted.
We could do that, yes, we could do that.
I think that solves the problem. What do you think, Rick?
The undercarriage is supposed to be steel, he said the last time.
Well, it could be made out, it could be wooden planking, there's
Well, you said
steel.
steel.
Yeah, there's some, the schematic which we brought shows steel beams, and then the platform is, it's up to the contractor.
The important thing is that it's continuous, so that there are no
Right,
gaps,
right.
and that there's a curve on the sides, is that correct?
Correct,
So that things don't roll off.
right, it's a performance
Yeah, it's a
specification, and
performance
the
spec, whether it's steel or,
specific detail, and so the working drawings will be prepared by the contractor.
whether it's steel or wood is not important at this point. What's important is how it performs, which is to keep things from falling down into the thorn brook below.
Big steel, I'm sure.
If you have a question you'd like to bounce off.
No, as far as the bond, the MDC requires a bond from the contractor. That includes the entire contract, which includes the EMS control. So he's bonded with us. If he doesn't provide that, we can use his bond to correct whatever
Yeah.
inactivity he has or activity he did.
Yeah.
That was
That's
not
pretty
part of the
much,
contract.
yeah.
So
There's no sense to have a
yeah, the work's already bonded 100%.
It's unlike a public bridge or a public road, it's a little different. The road is owned by MDC, the bridge is owned by MDC, and
And
it's
it's already
already
a bond
and it's all bonded,
So we
yeah.
could just say that the bond is held by MDC.
The bond that would satisfy the commission is the bond that's already being required by MPC.
Providing it's approved by this commission.
I guess what we could always do is, we have a division in our contract where we can provide Scott the language that's standard for all our contracts, and we can provide that to him. That details the bonding requirements for our work.
I don't anticipate a problem. It's just a matter of if you don't have this sort of coverage,
Yeah.
that's when you have a
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. And I hope in my career I'll never have to go after someone's bond, so.
Scott, were there other requirements that you consider would be good to have in addition?
Well, for the record, we'll have, Joan's gonna have 13 for the ENS bond, or the bond performance bond. We'll get that from the engineer, and I think 14 would be that the engineer notifies before construction starts, let us know when the meetings are, and let us know when it shuts down for the winter months. So just communicate by email through me, the chairman, what the dates are of construction. Does that work?
Okay, so we have two additional conditions. One has to do with the schedule and notification. The other has to do with assuring that the bonding is in place and it would satisfy the commission,
So far, including the 12,
including the 12.
we have a total of 14.
Okay.
And typically, the MEC will award the contract to the contractor unless they can meet the bonding requirements as part of their submission. So, and then we do have a pre-construction meeting that, hopefully that's not the date for.
Yeah, sounds good. Anybody else, any other questions or additions they'd like to make? Well, okay, we have a motion, which is to to approve this application with the 12 conditions plus the additional 2 conditions just enunciated. And we have a second for that. I guess we're ready to take a vote on this. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Scott will be in touch with you.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to put the meeting on hold and to reopen the ongoing public hearing, the continuation of the public hearing on the Peck Orchard Road Bridge Project, application number 1406. So at 7:35 p.m., we'd like to reconvene the public hearing. So, who would like to start at this point? Is Sue Murray around, by the way?
She's here.
Okay. You could tell her we're about to start. So make sure everyone. What? No, it's not. That's right, it's not. What?
Excuse me, those are bronze.
They're not belong to, do they belong to the town? Oh, they're yours?
No, they're ours, yeah, we're gonna put some boards
What do
in.
you say?
You gonna do something first?
Yeah, just a little quick, yeah.
Sure.
Are you first? You want up first?
Doesn't matter.
I don't know what's going on here, yeah.
Take your chair next.
Yeah.
When we saw you come in the door, we assumed, oh, he's a commissioner, so he can't vote at you. Being present.
I'm abstaining during the public hearing, and I will not be,
And
I
vote.
will not be doing any type of voting or any commission business during the public hearing.
Related to the Peck Orchard Road Bridge project.
So I don't know if that's an abstention or.
No, that's a recusal. You have to
It's a recusal?
Okay, thank you, Don.
That's a
And
recusal.
with that recusal, we now have one more position that we should have an alternate fill for Don for this part of the meeting. And we have, how many, we have Elliot and we have, and Elliot, you were on last time, right?
I was here last time, but I have not been involved in
You've
this.
not been involved in this, and Rick has been involved in all of his other proceedings related to this project, so I appoint Rick to fill in during this part of the meeting for Don as a full-time member. Thank you. Okay, having taken care of that, we are now in our public hearing, and does anyone, either from the selectmen or from the engineer firm, wish to make a statement at this point?
I think we just
looked at each other across the room, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
sort of-
submitted, yeah.
Now, I must say that I've received communications from both sides of this issue during the past month, or actually the past 2 months, since we didn't have our public hearing in the December meeting during that time. So what we have is we've got some responses to earlier questions by the engineering firm, Me and Associates, from WMC Associates, and then there will probably be responses to the responses. I would like to state that this is our last extension of this public hearing. We're not allowed actually to go beyond this, and we've had 2 others in the past anyway, 2 other parts of this public hearing, so we need to wrap it up tonight, and I'd like to, if at all possible, to stick with new information tonight. If we need to refer back to earlier information for clarification, say, let's do that. But let's try to concentrate on new material that has not been submitted, so we have that in our record before we close the hearing. So
it's on the record that the applicant has agreed to the final extension to give you the maximum number of days?
the maximum extension until our decision.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know yet now whether we're going to make a decision
Okay.
tonight, or which we could do if we have approval by the applicant. We could either have our decision after the public hearing to make a decision to have this project, or we could wait until the next meeting to make it. So if we determine to wait until the next meeting, which isn't until the second Wednesday of February, I think we need the approval of the agreement of the applicant to do that.
Correct.
So, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, so to speak. So, what's the best way to start here? We have responses from WMC.
Yeah, did the members get a copy of our responses by the chance? We emailed them to you, Mr.
You
Chairman.
emailed it to me,
And I don't know if they get
did you
forwarded.
bring copies?
We did. Dennis can pass those
Yeah,
out.
because I've got a copy for myself, but I
Yeah.
can make 12 more copies. Yes, please.
There's an odd page, odd looking part of it.
So that's the,
I don't need the one, since I've got mine.
Scott?
Sorry,
You say you had correspondence?
What's
You
that?
had correspondence on both sides?
Just email saying, asking for correspondence. It wasn't any substantial correspondence, but just sort of back and forth.
This is the
Requesting
only
information.
correspondence you got.
Beg your pardon?
This is the only correspondence you have that's version.
I believe so. Yeah. Well, wait a minute, now, it's a little bit murky, because we didn't have our public hearing last month, so I got some information before the last meeting from you,
Where's that?
and I think we all probably have that. But anyway, we'll
If I can speak, there's an enormous amount of information, and I sympathize with him in trying to keep it organized and quiet. Not having the public hearing at the 11th hour in November, on November 3rd, was very difficult to deal with, and has caused quite a bit of confusion.
I have a letter dated November 3rd
Right,
from Ian Goodwin, and I believe
that was,
that's the response of WMC is that letter.
right.
And I thought that everyone on the commission had that letter too, but I'm not positive at this point.
I don't really know. I don't know what you've done in the commission.
You didn't,
We didn't
have a meeting.
meet November 3rd.
We didn't have a meeting on
Right.
December 1st.
Oh,
We had a
December,
We
okay.
had a meeting in November.
Okay, so then that information was distributed. to
It must have been
the
distributed on the
commission. So
November meeting.
anything after that may not have been.
Right. So let me just go back and check when our November meeting was.
November 3rd.
Was November 3rd.
Yeah.
So that was properly presented,
Yeah, that was presented.
so.
It was presented.
So
at
you
that
probably have
meeting.
a copy of that. Well,
And this information I just passed out, they already have. I just checked, they already have the information, so I think we're all set to go, are we not?
Yeah, okay.
So you're talking about WMC's response to this November 3rd?
Yes, and the applicant, the team has it also.
Right, so I believe everything is in the record and has been distributed.
that, so everybody would
You have a copy of that November 3rd letter too? Okay. All right, so I think we're up to date.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
Got it? Well, okay. So is the way to proceed here to go through WMC responses to this November 3rd letter?
Yeah, I think we could do that. We have a couple things that we sent the commission chairman as well as the wetlands officer, which was our responses to the meeting written comments, in addition to some additional drawings that we did, which we're going to present tonight for some alternatives.
Right.
So I don't even necessarily need to stand up. My name is Steve McDonald with WMC Engineers for the record. And the first page of the responses are kind of general responses. They're kind of a summary of what we wanted to talk about. If you go to the second page of your comments, responses, we talk about, and I don't need to go through all this again. The commission is fairly familiar with the project and what's involved in it. Again, 500 feet of roadway, some impact to the brook, etc. So I'm going to go through down at the bottom is where we start responding to the comments. And the first one was the design and methodology issues. And I don't necessarily need to read this, but we're trying to make a distinction between this project and a typical subdivision or private development type of project that the commission might routinely see. This is a municipal project, and it's being overseen by the municipality, it's being overseen by WMC engineers, it's being overseen by the town's wetland officer. So during construction, for example, there's going to be a full-time construction inspector on the site who's either a professional engineer or what they call an ISIT level 4 DOT improved inspector with specific experience in construction of bridges over waterways. And that inspector is a full-time employee of ours. He's on the site full-time. He manages the project, runs the project meetings. We have weekly project meetings in which the wetlands officer is invited to, etc. So, and in fact, the wetlands officer and our representative will be there to monitor the contractor's progress and the erosion sedimentation control measure, etc. So it's sort of different than a typical private development project where there may not be full-time inspection and you're not really sure who's doing the inspection other than the wetlands officer. So there is a distinct difference between who's overseeing the construction of this. So it goes back then to the erosion sedimentation control measures that we have used on over 150 bridges throughout the state of Connecticut successfully. And we have not ever had a cease and desist order for a construction project. We've successfully managed them, and everything has worked out very well in terms of protecting the environment during construction. So our opinion is that this project is going to be well looked at as part of our duties, as part of Scott's duties as well. One of the second comments, and we also refer to the specifications, which we did provide the commission in our first application. The construction specifications are detailed after the DOT, what they call Form 816s. There's very detailed specifications in terms of the protections of the environment within those specifications, which have worked well for the department over the years and have worked well for us over the years. We also have, we've noted here, for example, water handling plan. What we typically do for water handling plan, and the NBC would be doing the same thing for their project, for example, is we have a general water handling plan within the specifications and the contract plans. The contractor, we can't tell the contractor how to build the work. We can tell him what to build, and we give him guidelines, but he has to tell us how he's going to do the actual work. So his specific water handling plan, he has to come back to the town and present to us for review his proposed water handling plan, for example, which we review and approve, and the wetlands officer will also have an opportunity to review that and approve that. So there's, again, multiple steps here. There's also notice to contractors about environmental protection and cleanup. We call them special provisions, which are above and beyond the standard DOT specifications for water pollution control, excavation and reuse of the existing channel bottom material, the coffer dam dewatering, the removal of existing bridge. So there's also, besides the standard specifications, there's very detailed specifications that we provided to you that govern how the contractor is going to do the work, certainly within the stream and above the stream. In terms of feasible alternative issues, what we looked at a number of alternatives. Maybe we didn't present them to the commission well before. We also looked at some additional alternatives based on our field meeting with the neighbors, and Mr. Meehan's out there at the time, and some of the suggestions that we looked at. And I'm going to have John take a few minutes, if you wouldn't mind, John. We sent the drawings off to you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm sure the commissioners have not an opportunity to see these. But we have some alternatives that we looked at, and we'd like to show you what the impacts were for those alternatives and how we came up to the alternative that we're proposing.
And these are not what you were just describing as your initial exploration of alternatives. These are more formalized.
They were looked at initially, but we'll explain how. For example, the 40 miles, and actually it turns out, when we did our, there was a question initially about the traffic study that was performed. That was an independent traffic study or traffic counts that performed. The actual 85th percentile speed was, I believe, 45 miles an hour.
In excess of 40.
In excess of 40. So in reality, the project should have been designed for a 45-mile-an-hour speed limit to meet the DOT specifications. I think, John, you've shown us a layout with 40 or 45?
Yes, 45-mile roadway geometry. So this lighter gray color here is their preferred alternative, the one we presented previously. The darker is a 45 mile per hour. Vice versa, I guess in the field they had that about realigning the road, moving it off the road to avoid the embankment cut here. That would be the realigned 25.
That was a alternative that was requested?
Yes.
By the Associates, is that correct?
Yes.
No.
By Susan Murray.
Oh, sorry. I don't have it correctly.
I wasn't at the field meeting, so.
So what's in light gray there is the actual...
That's our preferred alternative, yep. And these red lines in here, that's the actual existing edge of road. So, just for reference, if everyone can see that over there.
Just a quick question. Could you please explain how a different design, which is what is under feasible alternatives, you're saying that something different would cause more pedestrian and more bicycle hazards? How is that possible? If you change the design, it's the same.
That would be the do-nothing alternative.
That would be do nothing.
Any of these alternatives we're showing you here would be considered safe for vehicular or pedestrian traffic. The do-nothing alternative is the one that has issues. We have issues with certain.
Oh, okay, so nothing at all, period.
Well, the do-nothing alternative means to replace the bridge, but not realign anything. Is that correct?
Make any other improvements.
Correct.
My question would be, what's the benefit to the wetlands?
Well, that's
Is there any
my
benefit
next
to
sheet.
the wetlands with either of those
Yep.
alternatives?
I have another
that
sheet
you wanna
here.
present?
So I just kind of give you an overlay, look at the two of them on top of each other, preferred and the
And
the
basically,
two.
before you go down to the new sheet,
Oh, sure.
excuse me, the basic difference between these two alternatives and the preferred one is one seems to be moved over to the north and the other seems to be moved over to the south.
Correct. I guess during the field meeting,
So it's a horizontal change in alignment?
Yes.
Not a vertical?
there are vertical changes.
This is-
That has more to do on the next sheet, this one right here. Now, assuming we're going to maintain vertical alignment, vertical geometry, we're going to move that road over, as suggested during the field meeting. This blue line will be the impacts, the cut and fill impacts. The red line is our preferred alternative, as shown up here on the top is a preferred alternative. The amount of impacts to do that would be just over 3,000, whereas our proposed impacts would be just over 2,000. So you're adding another 1,000 square feet. You're actually also cutting trees down all along here, even though you're minimizing the tree cut on that steep embankment. You're going to be cutting all the trees down here. We'd also require a taking easement from the property to be able to get this road shifted over. It would increase the structure costs because this structure now is elevated and it's extended much farther than the original. So the structure costs are going to be more involved in here. This would be the 45 mile per hour. Similar thing where the vertical alignment here, the bridge, this is going to be raised up, raising the substructure to be much higher. So you can see how the impacts are a little greater here because you're going to be filling in more. And about the same, maybe a little less in here, about the same up here through that steep bank. You're not going to be saving that embankment of the trees. So that's just kind of a layout. So we have a preferred alternative that we had proposed to the commission, which is 2,000, and then it goes up to about 3,000 with the realigned. We also were asked.
Question?
Yes.
Is that allowed? Do I have your permission to ask a question?
Are you finished your?
Yeah, I was going to show the sections, but
How about we get the
Okay.
presentation and we can ask questions? Okay.
to actually increase impacts to the wetlands with these different alternatives, more than the preferred alternatives. We're pretty much maintaining the geometry of the road. You know, we're making the roadway improvements, the safety improvements here, but the impacts to the wetlands are going to be increased. I was going to go on to the sections next, but if you have a question.
Before we go into
happy to-
sections, do you have a question specific to
Yeah,
this?
on that bottom alternative plan,
For the
How
record, the
many-
one that's realigned 25 miles.
Yes, the
an hour.
rear line, 25 mile per hour.
yeah, how many feet are you moving going that way, north, south?
I'd have to scale it off the plan, but that red line is existing road, so if that's probably about 20 feet.
Oh, okay. But the request was to move it 2 to 4 feet to the southeast, not 20 feet. That was a request at the
Oh,
sidewalk.
okay, okay.
So do you have a plan describing that?
No, I didn't get that as a part of the
Okay.
comments, so I did it as a rear line 25 mile per hour.
It was a written handout that was given at the
Okay.
sidewalk.
To look at the sections, what I did here, let me show you. Pretty much what I did is to make it very similar in each spot. I took a cross-section, pretty much through our area that we had the most impacts to that embankment. And here we are with that cross-section. The orange here is, oh, I'm sorry. The first one is a preferred alternative plan, which shows what we had proposed before. We're limiting the amount of fill that we have here, but there's the cut in that embankment. Our second was the 45 mile per hour, where now we have to shift the road over to meet the 45 mile vertical and horizontal geometry. So you can see how the road is above the existing road bed vertically and shifted over horizontally. So now we're still cutting this area back. We're still cutting that embankment of trees.
Which have more fill.
Yes, you have much more fill. The third one is that proposed roadway where we're coming off and are realigning at 25 mile per hour alignment. And to achieve that, we couldn't achieve 2 feet move. We'd have to move it 20 feet at that area.
So you understood the request for the.
Well, I don't know, I
You
don't
didn't
necessarily
work out
got
for
this
some
2 to 4 feet thing. I was asked to realign at 25 mile per hour, align it with the project limits. So that's what I try to present.
Okay.
So this way you can see it shifted over, and there's much more fill.
As far as the bank removal,
Bank removal, the embankment with trees? Yeah.
as far as the embankment?
Yep.
At the November meeting, Commissioner Dawkins suggested a terracing of the bank.
Yeah, we looked into that. That's not really based on our watershed and the required drainage here. If you put a wall in here or any kind of terracing, you're still going to be impacting the slope.
So you're saying,
If I put a wall right here, to be able to build that wall with any kind of engineering standards, I would have to cut this material back out of there.
Pretty much the same amount that you're cutting back.
Pretty much. Now, I'd be able to fill back in,
Yeah,
but the
right.
trees would be gone.
Yeah,
so
I'm
you're
not
saying it's not
saying-
going to work, it's going to be negligible difference?
Yes.
in terms of the disturbance.
Correct.
What's the scale of this plan?
30 scale. So pretty much those are the different alternatives we looked at after realigning the vertical and horizontal line.
So on this plan, there's not that 2 to 4 feet request to move the road south.
The 2 to 4 feet, in my opinion, wouldn't make any significant difference between our preferred alternative, and the 2 to 4 feet is hardly noticeable.
Okay, well, what we did is we went up there,
So what?
looked at the road.
Thanks. What good does it do? What did you do at the last
And
month
we
meeting?
thought it was significant enough to give
You
us.
threw the tape away, didn't you?
Oh, it's right here.
That was a request.
Yeah.
If you didn't do it, you didn't do it.
What we did was
That's okay.
we used the geometry that is allowable by the regulations. We tried to fit the best curves in there that we could. I think we've gone to extremes to get down to the design waiver that we got. And there's someone here from DOT as well tonight that can speak to the process of the design waiver. But to get it down to the 25 mile an hour speed, the design was, I think, exceptional just to get that far, so.
I agree.
And again, I think our proposal, based on still meeting the criteria that we have to meet for the DOT to get the funding and to make the roadway as safe as possible, we've minimized the wetlands impact, in our opinion. And I think the alternatives shown tonight, it's just more impact. I know you're not concerned about cost, but one of them is extremely a lot more money.
In the initial, you didn't present it, it was designed for 40 miles an hour. Originally, that's the requirement.
Yeah.
They did have a waiver to get it down, and that's significant.
You're right, you're totally correct, and I think that's fantastic that.
I think if they presented at 40 miles an hour, you really would have been upset.
But what's surprising to me is that they're presenting 45-mile-per-hour design plans at the third public hearing when they were never
Because it
presented
was
before.
requested.
It was
It was
requested.
requested to
Right.
present, the commission requested them to present.
That's correct.
So that was per our request that they're presenting this now.
Oh, I
That
thought
was
it
the original
a prudent-
requirement.
A prudent alternative, but I'm fine, you're the experts.
No, we did request, they did present, as stated, they had presented earlier alternatives for bridge construction, but that really wasn't what we were looking for alternatives. We were looking for alternatives for alignment and to see what the difference in impact might be on the wetlands.
Of the
And that's what
expansive,
we're getting right now. Uh-huh.
of the expansive project, not of the original project, which was just bridge replacement.
The original project was just bridge replacement.
That was the criteria, bridge replacement and guide.
I think we can only go by the
Yeah.
application that's been presented, and I think the application that's been presented, this is part of it, so.
Well,
That's what
reference was made earlier to simple bridge replacement as being the do-nothing alternative, I believe.
Yeah, it was the bridge replacement and guardrails as presented to the town up until the public information meeting in March of 2014. That was the design.
But this is the
It's
same.
a 30% design, no, this is a 70% design.
But that's what,
That,
That's what you referred to.
The expansive project is the 70% design and is in the application for the wetlands.
That's correct.
That is correct. It changed over time.
I guess I'm just trying to make the point that what we had first discussed.
Yeah, the suggestion is that the plans changed from 30% to 70%. They did not.
Geometry's the same.
Geometry is exactly the same.
I'm just saying the project outline changed, and I'll go through that later. I don't want to interrupt you anymore at this point.
Yes, Don?
Yeah, I had a question. Out of the three alternatives you have up here, how many linear feet is the road going to be widened from 20 to 24 feet? On all three, right? Require that?
It would be
On all
about,
three of those,
about the same for each alternative.
to 24 feet?
Correct.
That's approximately a 20% increase in road surface.
Whatever the percentage is.
And what about the linear feet? Are
The linear
they all the
feet
same?
You can tell from the station, John.
No, actually, the 45 mile per hour is a little longer, and I think the real-line 25 and the preferred plan are pretty much about the same.
Why did you ever investigate a narrower increase to the road, the 22 feet?
Yes.
We did. Well, I know, I read some of those comments, but I don't understand why you just kicked that out.
Because it's part of the, under the federal local bridge program, it's a requirement to meet the federal guideline to get the 80% funding. And part of that, you need to widen the road.
But
and bring
when
up
you
the
say
new
in
standards.
the past history of all the engineering you've done on different projects, you've gone for waivers to
Correct.
get around that? Or not be able, not have to widen the road that much?
Width is not something that you can easily get a waiver for. Other design criteria like horizontal curvature, design speed, and so forth, within reason, you can get waivers for that, but width is usually pretty strict. And we have TOT representative here too.
Now, what is the linear feet of the width, of the widening? What's the footage length on these? What's of the proposed?
How long?
I think we're
Yes,
getting
how
off
long?
track again. We're
No,
getting
no,
on-
I
we're getting
wanna
to
know-
discussing- We're getting to discussing the road instead of the wetlands impact.
Well, that's my point. The point is, this is what you discussed. I think I'm at a planning and zoning commission meeting. I'm not even at a wetland meeting. You guys opened it up to all this discussion of engineering, road building, traffic flows, accident reports, public safety. Show me a regulation in the wetlands that is attached to public safety on traffic design engineering. Show me a wetland regulation.
Anything.
Well, I don't understand why this is not, this discussion should be.
We'd like to hear what these experts who come.
Exactly, we will, but this discussion should be in a zoning
I'm
meeting.
interested to hear what the guy from the DOT has to say.
This discussion should be in a zoning meeting, or a selectmen's meeting.
Well, that's coming up, and you can take it up if it
Well,
gets.
They're not going to
Excuse
zoning.
me, Susan, can we get back to your initial question, which had to do with the 22-foot width, right? I
Well,
think that was answered, right? Was that
I
answered?
think so, because they say that
And
the
that does
federal
impact the
funding.
wetlands,
Yeah,
because-
it's been discussed
It's a
several
2-foot.
times.
Yeah, it's been discussed, right, but the 2-foot difference is not, the 2-foot reduction to 22 feet is not acceptable to the federal standards. They couldn't get it approved through the state or the federal government funding if they went down to 22 feet, is that correct? That's pretty much it. And that does, if they could get it down to 22 feet, that would make a difference in the wetlands impact, because it's 2 foot less, but it's not possible.
It'll be a lot less impervious surface, and you're on a steep grade, you're on a 16% grade. You're starting at 24-foot wide road on a 16% grade. Carrying it all the way down, at least 400 feet?
But, Don, the fact is, it's not allowed, though. What the 24 foot is the minimum.
Can you answer, has there not been one bridge project federally funded that has not had a waiver for 20 to 22 feet? Has there not been one? Has anybody researched that?
Is that a question for us, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, engineering, DOT.
Would the DOT person be aware?
Yeah, Mark can answer this too. We've had roads that have gone down to 22 feet, but not at this traffic volume and not at this, the speeds of the traffic that are existing there
So
today.
we're basing it on traffic volume, speed,
That's correct.
Functional
accidents, type
obsolescence.
thing.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right now, the width of the road is considered to be, the 22 feet is considered to be, I'm sorry, is it 20 or 22?
It's 20 existing.
It's 20 existing, it's considered to be functionally obsolete by the Federal Highway Administration. So it's not wide enough for the traffic volumes that are experiencing today. And so therefore we had to go up to at least 22 to get rid of the functional obsolescence. And in addition to that, we have to comply with the DOT design standards, if I'm correct, Mark? And the DOT design standards those traffic volumes require that the minimum roadway width be 24 feet.
Could I just, at this point,
I actually read something different, but go ahead and continue.
could I just add something at this point, just for perspective's sake? I went back, because we had referred to earlier bridge projects that the town did, and I went back and checked our records, and back in 1997, when we did the additional road bridge project, some of the same characters were here. Actually, WMC was involved, Steve McDonald was in front of us.
Right.
And there are a lot of same issues that are related to vertical and horizontal alignments and, fill the 1 to 2 slope and all of that. And it was also at that point discussed about the 22-foot versus 24-foot width. And at that point, I believe the 22-foot was allowed because it was there was a traffic study done, and it was a very low volume rural road.
That's correct.
And what
So
was
that
the
is
agency
possible
on that road?
with the road that's got that low volume, which evidently was not met by this traffic study done on the Peck Orchard Road Bridge project. Is that correct?
That's
Do
correct.
you recall what the ADT of the Dishmill Road was?
I don't,
Because when I called, nobody could answer.
yeah,
that.
that was done, we purged most of our records from back then, but it was, I believe it was something less than 200 vehicles per day.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was in the 100 vehicle per day range.
I've got it written down somewhere.
That over by Howell's Pond?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Don, you didn't really answer this question, but the alignment of the roadway affects what happens at the wetlands.
Yes.
It's not just one point. When you change the alignment of the road at a higher design speed, it has a big effect on the wetlands because it moves the bridge. Okay, and if you look at his drawings, you can see there's a major impact at 40 miles an hour or on the different alignments you know, when you hit the brook different, crossing the wetlands, it does make a difference on,
Well, I'm
on
not-
outside the limits of the project.
Yeah, I'm not supporting a 40.
No, I'm just saying that it's what we're improving on the road will affect the wetlands where you put the road. Okay? It's not just one point. You just can't move the road up here or keep the road here and make 25 miles an hour and leave the bridge where it is.
Okay, this might be a good point for you to describe a little more detail about what the actual impacts of the stream it would.
From the various
would be
alignments.
With the different alternate plans.
Because this is our preferred alternate, which we had 2,035 square feet. That included all temporary and permanent impacts. I kind of highlighted that in purple here with our proposed cut and fill limits. The second alternative would be to go to 45 to meet the 85th percentile and the excess speeds that are out there that people are traveling, especially coming down the hill, they're traveling about 44 miles per hour. That would be this blue line. And to do that, we would have to, of course, raise the road up. Profile-wise, I think we showed on the sections how that affected the vertical alignment in at least this area, where this is pretty much for the embankment cut that was discussed. You can see I'll raise it up a couple feet, at least 4 feet there. Raise the road in that section. Now that elevation is brought across the bridge to meet the DOT standards. The structure of the bridge would be increased, these wing walls would be increased, and the impacts to the channel would be increased by approximately about 500 square feet. This is
The black-
2,400, sorry.
The heavy black line is the wing wall?
Yes, the new wing
The
walls.
new wing wall?
So we'd have to make this wing wall that long to avoid filling in because we're raising the road up in this area.
And in order to build that wing wall,
We'd have to access the channel,
yeah,
coffer in the channel, dig a foundation in there.
yeah. So you're actually gonna have to temporarily move the stream?
Yes, you know, we're, depending on the toe
Is
or
that-
the
okay.
front side of the wing wall, might be at a couple feet. We can try to use some design things to make the heel bigger and the toe less
Yeah.
intrusive into the stream channel environment, but I'm thinking at least
But
7
you're
feet.
actually impacting where that channel is, at
Yep.
least during construction.
During construction, and after, we'd have to rip wrap it, put the material on that we described last
All
time,
right.
and fix the channel. So that just purple shaded area was just, hey, we're gonna definitely be in this whole area.
All right.
Kind of moving the chain, we probably have to widen it out a little bit here because we're gonna be filling in so much with the huge wall that we have there.
If you raise the road, that's got to be the option that requires the most fill, right?
Correct.
Yeah, you can see it on there.
This area, just in that one particular section. Now, as you go higher up the hill towards Massachusetts, this is gonna reduce down. And as you get to the bridge, that's gonna increase.
Yeah.
Because
The
now,
new road is gonna be 24 feet wide, is that right?
correct.
How wide is the road prior to that, coming down the hill?
At the bridge, I believe it was 20 feet.
20 feet.
then
And how
outside that,
wide is the road beyond that area?
It differs. It's not
It differs.
uniformly straight, but
You expect,
it's not
you
20.
expect people to drive 45 miles an hour on this little piece of road, but the previous section and the after section is not built for 45.
That's right.
Correct. That's why we'd have to
So what
realign.
are we having, different speed limits going up here?
No?
No, it's posted for 25 miles per hour.
Yet this is built for 45.
No, our initial design was for 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, but the road you're proposing is for
This is
45.
the alternative that we're looking at, impacts only for the
John,
commission.
no, sir, we are not proposing that. That was an alternative that was looked at the request of the commission. We're proposing a 25 mile an hour design speed, not a 40 mile an hour design speed. The 40 was just an alternative that was looked at to show you the impacts,
Oh,
what that would mean. Because in theory, the road should be designed for 40 or 45 miles per hour, according to the DOT and the federal standards. We've been able to get an exception to those standards to be able to design it to 25 miles an hour in order to minimize the impacts to the wetlands and the
that's
surrounding.
probably a proper speed for that whole road.
Well, it should be.
Yeah, that's what it is.
45 is,
It's posted 25.
It's posted 25, but people,
It'll still be posted.
yeah.
But people are traveling 40 plus miles per hour.
Absolutely.
you say there's 400 traveling on that road, I doubt that also. There isn't that many people living up above that road.
Okay.
I
Yeah, do you have
one,
point to make on
one
this
statement that on the road from the Mass border down to the North Greeley border, there was
I know.
a study done in 1997, and the average width of the road is 16 to 18 feet, plus or minus. And I have documentation for that, for the commission.
It shouldn't be.
So we're dealing with a very narrow road to start with.
Very, very narrow, very many multitudes of curves.
Yep.
I mean, you can see an area right here, this black line, this curve, we're matching that edge. It's only a couple feet wider. And then you can see how it changes. We're trying to fit in our 25 mile per hour, and we hugged this side and filled it over, expanded it out here, but at the ends, we're grading right back in, so.
Okay, now could you please describe the
Yes.
impact on the realigned?
The last one,
Alternate plan?
this alternate was to shift it 2 to 4 feet. What I tried to do is I tried to meet this incoming tangent at 25 miles per hour to avoid any impacts to the embankment.
Okay.
I primarily thought that was,
You thought
that was the main
West
intent
to
of
stay
this
away from the
realignment,
embankment, so-
was to stay away from any
Okay.
cut here. So I have to put a 25 mile per hour curve in here.
Mhm.
And I came
And that's
across
how
pretty much
far-
the same profile, and then I had to introduce a curve, 25 mile curve down here.
So by the request to move it just 2 feet over wouldn't have been possible
Well-
because you had to design for 25 miles an
I
hour?
have to design for 25, so I have to put a curve in here, I have to meet the incoming tangents, I just can't, curve here, do a sharp curve and not make it work. I have to, my intent, I thought was shifting it was to avoid any cut to this embankment, which is up in the upland review area and outside, so. I thought that was the intent, of shifting it over, so I shifted it over to avoid any impacts in this area, and as you can see, it's right along the edge of pavement, because I'm assuming we're gonna remove that pavement, and not gonna leave it out
So
there.
you avoid impact on the embankment, but what do you do for impact in terms of?
So
the,
this is putting in the area for the drainage.
Right.
I get the water sheet off the road into that drainage, bring that down. Shifting it over is gonna shift it over and start to fill in the upstream wetland area.
So you have.
In addition to cutting all the trees down
You have
within
along
this
the wing
plan.
walls there as well as you do
Correct.
on the other
Correct.
alternate. And they're about just graphically, they look like
Yes.
they're at least as much impact in terms of wing wall length as you
Yes.
have on the 45.
They might not be as high.
Not quite as high.
Yeah, because vertically I'm trying to match the length, correct, yes. Because I'm really trying, I have to meet a balance between the fill that's coming in here and the stream channel bottom.
Okay. And where are the wing walls located on the preferred alternatives plan? Because I don't see any dark lines.
I'm sorry, let me grab the other plan. I didn't highlight that one as visible, but this plan will show that. This is 1:20, so the scale's a little bit different.
Yeah, why don't you put it over on that, so we can see it together all together.
I'll move this out of the way.
Yeah, that's good, you can do that, that's fine. So where are the wing walls there? I see.
The wing walls are in orange.
The ones, okay. And so what we're doing is comparing right now, anyway, in terms of the impact of the stream bed, we're basically comparing wing walls, are we?
Wing walls, in terms of
I
impacts
mean,
of stream bed.
these wing walls and retaining walls, because those are the ones that seem to be
Well,
impacting the moving of the stream.
this one's gonna be more of the stream,
That's what
because we're shifting that bridge over, and I don't know if you can, you see the blue here, is the channel. We're actually shifting this bridge back to avoid realigning the stream, so we're gonna utilize our excavation area in this area for the stream, instead of having to realign any of the material up here. So I shifted that structure back in the picture there. Shifted it back so I can make a nice U-bend in here, instead of having to...
Why would you shift it?
Well, if I put this structure here, I'd have to make this wall even longer to match that grade, because now I'm shifting it over. So what I tried to do is I tried to use the natural alignment here of the stream to go through, and I put my abutment wall here.
On your preferred alternative plan, the bridge is in exactly the same
Yes.
spot that it's in now.
Yes.
And the other two plans, they have to be moved.
This plan, no. The 45 mile per hour, I kept it in the same spot.
The bridge itself,
Bridge itself,
right,
because the alignment is conducive to not having to realign the channel.
okay.
This alternative, shifting it over, this channel has this little S curve in here. For me to do that, I would have to go on the other side of the property, other side of the stream, and hook out a channel in here. So I shifted that bridge down slightly, maybe 10 feet or so. Just shifted it that way to make that channel kind of realign, so I wouldn't have to have more impacts to this wetland environment over there.
So
Go onto that property
The
and cut
realignment
trees
of the
down.
channels is
I mean, just to summarize, the realigning of the channels is a lot less than your preferred alternative?
Yes. 1,000 square feet, and that just doesn't include any of the disturbance that would be necessary outside of that wetland review area. That's, all I did was quantify the water course and wetland impacts.
Are you saying it's 1,000 square feet less?
Yes, yes, we have about 2,035 as opposed to 3,060. And that doesn't include the structure costs of the town, anything like that. That just impacts, solely impacts the wetlands and water course. And like I stated, it didn't have anything to do with the upland review area impacts.
Okay. Very good.
One other thing we'd like to discuss also, if that we can continue on. There was also a question about the treatment of the stormwater runoff downstream in front of Sue's property, where Sue, oh, there she is over there. And so that discussion, we had a discussion in the field about the sizing of the of that. And so we re-looked at that, and John's got an example of that.
Yeah, I guess in the field meeting was, a size was given. So do you remember the size? The length and width?
The scour hole?
The scour hole, correct.
The scour hole, okay.
I said if you couldn't use natural methods to control the stormwater runoff as per the Clean Water Act, the Connecticut Clean Water Act recommends, then try to improve the curbing by lessening it, because curbing is a no-no according to the state of Connecticut Clean Water Act. And you're going to need to do something with that scour hole, because our town cannot afford to clean it every month with all the sand that's going to be going into it. So I suggested to increase it by 10 by 14, and I think Steve said you were going to double it. I really don't know the specific figures. And I also
so it's 10 by
recommended
14.
that you add some swale going up to pole 2011-19.
No, 2119.
2119, yeah. And,
Okay. Well, I just wanted the 10 by 14 was asked, but we actually originally showed 24 by 8 foot wide scour hole at this location. I tried to make it longer to stay off the property. Now this will be 25% of the water quality volume. It wasn't necessarily designed to treat any water quality volume except for fill up with that 25%, infiltrate, anything else come out. In order to treat the water quality volume, we have to make it meet 0.01 acre feet, which is about 440 cubic feet. Increasing the size 26 by 15, so you're pretty much making it 4 times bigger than we have. In plan view, you can see what we have proposed here in red. We had the water come off the road, come down to a little swale into the preformed scour hole. It's going to fill up. 25% of that water quality volume was going to infiltrate. The remainder was going to overland flow to the stream, about 20 feet of overland flow through the trees and brush and stuff. To treat the water quality. That was the original intent.
The original one, okay.
Well,
The 70s.
well, the original submitted plan showed a scour hole about 10 feet long, 6 feet wide, with a about a 10 foot long swale, modified swale going into the 10 by 6 foot scour hole. That's on the original plan. So you increased it to what now?
This is the one that was submitted in the inland wetlands application.
It-
Regardless of what was presented before, this was presented in the inland wetland application.
And you said that you chose that size to try
What we tried to do
to
is,
decrease the impact of people's property? Or
yes,
without-
yes, because the property line is right here. I have a highlighter. So,
So
that's
you
the
were trying
property
to
line.
stay
I'm
off
trying to
the
stay off the
property.
property by doing this design. Pretty much just trying to capture some of the water because the embankment, from where we're putting the curb in, the stream's right there. Right now, you have buildup of sand on the side of the road, causing the water to concentrate, blow through in certain areas, and deposit all the sand in the stream. So we decided to put curb there and bring it to the sediment, settles out in there, and the town will clean it. If you don't do that, you just let it sheet flow, it's gonna, same thing's gonna happen. It's gonna build up on the side of the road. Eventually it's gonna concentrate, blow through, and you're gonna have the washes like you do now. So yes, the town will have to maintain this, but I'm assuming the town has maintenance vehicles that treat the water. catch basins and things that you have to maintain.
We have a catch basin.
Excavator, shovel.
Available.
Let me go back to this, so I feel like we can see better. The bottom one here,
The bottom line is what you came up with as.
is to increase it. If I'm gonna increase,
Instead of just lengthening it, you widened it as well as lengthened it?
yes, I've lengthened it and widened it.
Okay.
There's some mature trees in this area, so I didn't want to make it any longer. There's that utility pole, which is right in this location.
Yeah, that's 2119.
So for me to go any farther this way, there's some big trees here I want to cut down. I want to kind of keep it in an area which is grassy and at this time. But the extent of what we said, okay, if we're going to make it a little bit bigger, to treat anything there, we might as well treat the water quality volume.
Yeah,
In order to do that, we have to enlarge it. We have to make it 3 feet deep
Right, and make it deeper
and
as well.
deeper and wider, and that's what this picture shows.
And that doesn't require removal of any mature trees?
Yes, because there's some mature trees down here which will be impacted by this cut
Yeah.
and fill material. So there's going to be trees here that the roots are going to be impacted.
How many trees would have to be removed?
I didn't
for this
count them.
addition? Yeah.
Now, are you presenting that as an alternative, or have you guys chosen, which one is the one that you guys are proposing that you want to go with?
It's the first one. of
Okay,
course.
I was looking,
Well, this would require more defined easements on the property.
okay.
So that's the one
Be more
that's the one you
impacts.
submitted?
Yeah, that's the one I see
That's
on
the
the plan.
original. So you're going with the original sizing?
That's what's in our application. If the commission so desires that we go to our alternative,
That's the one that's on the
that could
plan.
be a
I see
condition
it
of
right here.
approval. We don't have a problem going with the alternative.
But you're not going to lengthen the modified riprap swale going into it? You're not going to lengthen that?
I believe, it's actually, is there a red stuff going to tell, John?
It's actually going to be shorter for this alternative, but this is going to be much bigger. So the square footage is actually less for our second alternative. Now this little swale, what I think he's talking about, is after we come down the road and we end our guide rail system right after that utility pole. On this side of the utility pole, that stream gets really close to the road, so we're protecting that embankment from any cars going off. So right after this utility pole, we're putting an anchor on it.
Cars crashing.
And so we're pretty much trying to get this water that's going to be in the gutter here, we're going to try to get it over by coming down and into this scour hole. We can modify that if the commission wishes to try to reduce this, shift this over here. I just don't want to really affect the guide rail anchor. So I want to pave swale, at least pave past it, so there's no undercutting or any future.
So where's the curbing end?
Right here, at the end.
So you haven't changed the length of the curbing at all?
No, we did not.
We weren't able to because we looked at it very carefully because if you don't have curbing, you got to get it into a swale or something. There's no room really there to do it.
Right.
So we had to leave the curbing where we had it. We tried to shorten it up, because I know you've mentioned that several times, to try to shorten the curbing up, but
And the guardrails? What's the reason for bringing the guardrail all the way down there?
it's a safety
Safety issue.
standard.
This is the
There's never
section
been
road.
guardrails there. Never been an accident there.
It was built in 1970, or 70 years ago.
Yeah.
Different guidelines than they had back then.
Right now, they're just post and wire, yes.
You mentioned 25% water quality
Yes.
with the first one.
Correct.
Now, I didn't hear the second one.
The second one is
100%.
100% water quality volume.
Okay.
Water quality volume is 440 cubic feet. The first one we had is 112. And I didn't necessarily design this to be a water quality treatment system. It was just pretty much as something, a scour hole is a standard outfall protection. We made it bigger to accommodate for some more water and some more sediment capture.
Okay, so this
Because we had some
should
space
be far superior.
Yeah, in terms of the water going back into the stream, your second alternate shown down below.
This one's going to hold more water, but it's going to require more impacts, not only to
It's really-
private property, but also to
Right.
the wetlands. This is pretty much at the same level as the stream. So
Okay,
you're
right.
digging a big hole
Yeah,
there.
okay, so it'll probably be
Big and big hole
filled
there.
during, when the stream
Yes.
is up, it'll be at the same level
If
probably.
the stream overtops this elevation, if it ever overtops the road, that would be filled.
But in the long term, not for construction, you'd have to remove trees and so on, but in the long term, would you say it would improve the water quality going
If
back
it's
into the
properly
stream for the road
maintained,
projects,
yes.
or would it be negligible?
I think if it's properly maintained, yeah, you'd be treating the water quality volume every storm.
Considerably more,
Yeah.
because it's 100% as opposed to
It's,
25%.
I know a lot of the water quality you deal with parking lots where you have a lot of sitting cars that leak a lot of gases and
Yeah.
oils.
Mhm.
So in terms of actually what it's going to be doing, I feel it's going to be, negligible, as you said, because cars just driving by.
Yeah.
You know, if it was a parking lot there and there was a lot of oil and grease getting on the road, antifreeze dripping, this would be.
So what's actually gonna end up here is more
More roadway,
sand.
more roadway sand,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
If it's
and
properly
in terms of
maintained,
that,
it'll keep
because-
that out of the river.
Yeah, this
It's
will help
intact.
keep that out of the river.
Yeah.
Is that the best way to keep the sand out of the river, to have a good deep trail?
I mean,
like
if
that?
you want to put a closed drainage system out there, which I don't think anyone wants, that's even more maintenance. You get pipes that fill up, you gotta go out there and clean the
Yeah,
pipes
right,
out,
yeah.
clean the catch basins, then you have to add more curb in.
Yeah.
It's more of a maintenance issue and expense also.
So even though this is more invasive in a way than your proposed scour hole, in the long term, it might be better for the water quality and for keeping sediment, or especially sand, out of the stream.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely gonna have more volume, but it's, like I said, it's gonna require much more impacts.
Okay.
And is that something that we don't want, the town probably doesn't want to partake in acquiring this easement? And, you know, if the commission wishes us to have the town acquire this land, then we'd have to acquire the land.
So that would change the whole permit.
That would have changed the
Change
easements.
the-
We'd have to acquire, instead of getting just an easement to drain, or a right to drain, it'd become a drainage right-of-way easement in favor of the town. So they would pretty much have, and take that land and be able to do what they will, you know, go in there and maintain
And
it.
it also requires, you said, quite a few more trees to be cut down.
Yes, the grading's not shown on here, but you can see by the cut limits on either side, you know, you're talking cutting the trees all around this area. And I don't think anyone here wants that, so.
And really.
Well, it's like nothing's free, you know?
Yeah, I know, no, and
It's either,
basically,
it's either you're gonna take some trees down
yeah.
for better water quality treatment, or not.
But the water quality treatment involves the trees now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the trees are natural water quality filter.
Yeah.
And why isn't there any natural filtration systems provided in this plan?
Natural filtration systems?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by natural? This is groundwater filtration. The water's gonna go through the rock into
It's
the dirt.
filtration through the vegetation.
Runoff filtration, are you saying? I'm talking about direct groundwater filtration.
I'm not an expert.
This is what, pretty much the water sits in here, and over time, the water percolates into the soil. Groundwater recharge. I think what she's explaining is sheet flow, sediment going through a grassed area, a wooded area, the sediments will
But we don't have
settle.
room for that.
We could, but
Yeah.
we're trying to, with this design, we're trying to provide a little bit of sediment capture.
Yeah.
Instead of letting the sediment migrate through here and keep migrating through, we're trying to stop it.
Before you go
Yes,
further, while we're still addressing this, DOT and Wade, are we gonna be forced into abandoning sand and going to, the liquid sodium chloride that they're using on the state roads? Because if that's the case, then how much sand we're trying to filter becomes moot.
Well, there's environmental problems with the chemicals the states use now, I mean, no.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, I hope we never come to this.
Me too.
That becomes another issue. Now that's treating, you know, water that's got laden with salt, dissolved salts.
In which case.
It's getting
better
infiltrated.
Alternative would.
It's better than just allowing overland flow.
Mhm.
We're trying to stop some of that with some infiltration. I believe we stated that in the application. This would just treat that water quality volume that the DEP likes to have on a lot of these big commercial sites. It's part of the treatment train, so. Just to show you that, the size difference would be required to meet that.
Okay.
All right? Is there any other questions Commission have?
Yeah, I just have one last follow-up.
Yes.
Why is it that when you increase the length and the width of the scour hole, as you have that alternative, why does the depth have to be increased?
It doesn't have to be increased,
Well,
but if I need to meet the water
But you
quality.
said that the depth
Yeah.
on this one would be
Yeah, what I'm trying to do,
greatly increased.
if
Why-
I-
I don't understand why you have to dig it so deep. Why?
Okay, well, if I don't dig it so deep, I have to make it even longer to get that volume.
We need to retain a certain volume.
Think
Certain
about a water
volume of water,
balloon.
so many gallons of water.
Exactly.
And if it's not as deep, it's gotta be bigger area-wise. So we don't have to, we could make it twice the size of that and only make it 1.5 feet deep.
You can make it 1 feet deep and make it 300 feet long.
But the original design is shallower than the...
Correct.
That's correct.
That wasn't
We were not
treated.
trying to treat the water quality volume at that point. We were trying to treat, we were really trying just to protect from erosion at that point and get the water back into the brook. It wasn't really there to treat the complete water.
I'm going for 112 cubic feet of material, so 440.
Right.
So I'm making it 75% bigger than, just to treat the water quality volume, which is not necessary. But, you know, if the commission or the town would like to
So the
do that.
design is a 25% spillover. You're saying
I
you
think
can
we're-
only treat 25% with the original design?
Of the water quality.
Seven-
75%
spillover and a 25%
Keeping it in. Correct.
absorption.
I think we got two things we're talking about here, and I bet.
Yeah.
Please,
I think, you know, it's interesting.
excuse me, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought the original direction this line of thinking was going was just to extend the length of the scour hole so that it could absorb, it could have more sand in it before it had to be cleaned out, as opposed to a whole design for improving water quality, for instance. That's a whole different thing. You're considered the improvement in water quality. If you forget that, if you just go back to the original purpose of the scour hole, I thought the question was, can we make it long, if we make it longer, would that mean there would be less likely for that sand to go into the, back into the stream then because the town
But if I
wouldn't
make
have
it-
to clean that as often?
The same amount of sand's gonna get there.
Yeah,
It's gonna get there, whether I make it another 50 feet longer.
yeah, eventually, right.
Most of that sand's gonna deposit in that first section.
Right.
So, I mean, then it's gonna fan out and work
It
its
doesn't
way.
matter how long it is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, if you have a 50-foot thing that's level, the sand comes down just like in the stream, it deposits right there
Okay.
at the bottom of the stream, and then it
So
gets
you
moved
got
through the stream.
law of diminishing returns.
Yeah,
as
so
you
you're gonna
get
have
longer.
most of that sediment deposit right there, so.
So it doesn't really make it, wouldn't really make
I
a big
mean-
difference if it was twice as long. in terms
No,
of-
then I'd have to be cutting more trees. There's actually a driveway, I think, right around here.
It's about 70 feet down.
Okay.
Yeah, so a driveway somewhere in this area.
70 feet.
I really don't want to be cutting these trees down. There's a grassy area that I think we can get in with minimal impacts to it.
And that's what you show.
That's what we kind of have shown.
So obviously, the smaller one is gonna go up faster with sediment,
Correct.
and it's gonna need more maintenance on a more prompt basis.
Yes.
Right, and it's gonna be overflowing into the
I'm
stream.
looking at it like a cereal bowl, you know, the bigger the bowl, you know, but not deeper. It may hold less.
The difference-
Than if it's deeper.
The difference is the cereal bowl you fill from the middle, and this one you fill from the end, which
Yeah.
is what his point was, which is filling from the end, means your sediment collects in the front, kind of like a dam or a berm in a way,
Just
right?
remember, we're trying to, this water that's going to be coming in this area on the road, we're really just trying to keep that sand from going directly into the stream, trying to get some capture. And that was the intent. This will be like pretty much like a level spreader. You guys have probably seen that on the projects, where this elevation is the same elevation with riprap and water, then migrates down through the water. Clean out time? Well, this is 110 cubic feet, and this is 440, so I'd say
He wants to know how
75%
often
more.
they're gonna have to come.
Oh, clean out time. Well, it depends if they wait till it gets filled or not.
Let's say they have the same criteria for either one, so let's say either one is.
I'd probably recommend cleaning it out. This bigger one, they could, I don't know, what do you guys think, 3 months, every 2 months?
Well,
winter?
I'm not gonna,
I don't
Once a
know.
year would be nice.
I don't know.
Once a year, I mean, you're not, typically, you shouldn't have as much erosion on the banks as you have now.
This is
And
just
then
gonna
you're
be.
gonna be, it's gonna be the sand you put on the road. I mean, I don't know what that holds, but I mean, typically you might use, maybe half the yard to yard per storm, in that section of road.
Just in that section?
Maybe. And I mean, it's not all gonna go right down that one spot. Not on, I mean, on that road, so I mean, you're only talking a very small amounts in that area.
No, there's a tremendous amount that fills right to there, especially with 200 feet of curb.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're sanding
It's
the
all in
road.
the gravel right there, and the road is heavily sanded because it's very, very steep.
And plus you're
and very,
increasing
very
the
curvy.
road
And
surface
you're
20%.
increasing the impervious surface.
You're getting
So,
20% more road surface that has to be
It's
sanded.
gonna
You
be
think that increases the sand?
It's gonna be a
For
definite-
when I do 12 miles of road in West Hartland, I use about 6 yards of sand to treat it per pass. If it's an ice storm, you're gonna use more.
I just want to,
That's 12 miles of road.
But it would definitely be an added maintenance to the town at a cost. And that's a lot of what the stormwater program is about with the Connecticut State Clean Water Act is that they want to prevent scour holes so that it's lesser cost to the towns. And that's both for large cities, small cities, and there's been many, many articles in the Current about it, and there's ongoing public hearings right now to have natural filtration.
Well, on that note, is there, without doing any huge modification, is there any alternative to do without a scour hole? It doesn't seem like that.
Go back to a no curb. And
Let it go into the brook.
situation right now.
It's gonna go in the brook.
It's gonna build up.
It just all dumps directly right in the brook.
Yep, it's gonna
With
build up.
no ability to clean it out or anything.
Exactly. It's gonna be much harder for the town to go in there and scoop out the sand that's in the river. Than it is from the scour.
So from your professional point,
Yes,
any of this is an improvement to what's
that's
there now?
correct.
But that's
Okay,
from
thank
an
you.
engineering professional point, correct?
there for a while.
An engineering
Yeah.
professional. Then you have the environmental professional expertise, which may differ.
That's a
from
trade-off.
that. But let's move on.
Okay, do we have anything more that you want to?
No, I have it all said, and if you have any
Okay.
questions, I'll
Well,
be able
maybe we
to.
should move to Sue and.
Right, I have a short
Thank you.
presentation.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, please, again, if we could first present new information.
Here's here. I know a lot of this is dealing with zoning and road issues, and this is a wetlands commission. And, I feel for you because it really shouldn't be part of your application. But the project to me is disturbing because of the extraneous work beyond the bridge repair. I turned my focus to review the project in depth and quite honestly have spent hundreds of hours researching and learning. It's not uncommon for me because when I work on volunteer projects, such as our 10-year plan and the Lower Wild and Scenic Study management plans, I've done the same thing. The experience can be trying, but gaining knowledge and a desirable end product makes it all worthwhile. I've said this many times before, but my goal for the bridge replacement project is to bring to the table a plan to satisfy all the parties. I've searched, as I said, high and low, all my resources, met with people, took time off of work, read the Connecticut Highway Design Manual, spoke with different groups, as I mentioned, and tell you, I might need to build an addition to file all my paperwork. You might already know, and those of you who don't, my family has retained the services of REMA Ecological Services and Megan and Gooden Engineering LLC. Fortunately, they've been very good to us, and they're trying to find a solution that will effectively solve all the issues that we're dealing with. And they provide a discounted cost of just about $4,242 without tonight's meeting. I'll leave it up to the commission, but if the expertise that we've provided to be of value to you in this project, I read in your regulations that number 7E on page 8 would do some sort of compensation, and that would be much appreciated if possible. You might not know, but so far, although it's been a very difficult decision, we chose not to retain legal services as we sincerely do not want further costs. So, since I don't have a representative here to present this, you're going to need to bear with me with this presentation. I find that the three main components of the bridge project is number one, the bridge replacement, number two, the embankment removal above the bridge, and number three, the stormwater runoff below the bridge. Regarding the first item, the bridge replacement, I think that we're all satisfied with the design, assuming that we include a low-flow channel to connect the two streams and a natural substrate. Moving on to the second portion of the embankment removal above the bridge, I know we've talked quite a bit about that. And it seems to me that the funding agencies recommend removal on basis of traffic volume, speed, and accidents. The state legal reports and common knowledge prove the basis is flawed. I have a handout here that shows the number of cars that are on the road, number of accidents on the road, and also a description of the road provided by the state of Connecticut before they became the DOT. The removal consequences, as I see them, are temporary and permanent wetland impact. This is removal of the embankment above the bridge. It also provides speeding violators to be rewarded and encouraged to speed. I spoke to several people in town that drive the road on a consistent basis, and they said that if they can see around the natural embankment on the road with an increased sight line, they will be driving faster. We have a liability issue as well, as the future speeding can cause more accidents of more severity, which could be a liability to the town if it goes to court. A feasible and prudent alternative would be to remove 2 trees and the loose rock on the embankment. And I do have a handout there that I passed out at the November 21st site walk that all the parties at the site walk received. It's dated November 24th, 2014. And it would provide public safety as we would retain the natural speed control of the embankment. It would provide ecological advantages because the trees would still be there would be filtration, air quality, and the thermal properties that will be taken away by the embankment removal would remain if the embankment was not removed. In addition, the feasible and prudent alternative supports the 10-year plan of conservation and development. There's also a handout there that's got the seal of Hartland on the face, and there's a couple of excerpts from the 10-year plan within there. To save time, I'm not going to read all the supportive documentation. Number 3, as I see, is the main part of this project, is stormwater runoff below the bridge, as the WMC engineer has just described. I don't think you can miss it, as the publicity for the Connecticut Clean Water Act is going into its second phase, where it gives the towns the ability and charges them to take care of stormwater runoff. And they urge the towns to act on the natural infiltration processes that allow stormwater to be absorbed back into the ground. We have the unique opportunity to support the Connecticut Clean Water Act and be heroes and looked up upon. The application design currently uses unnatural methods of extensive curbing and scour hull. There are maintenance costs to the town, and there's an article in the Hartford Current that I forgot to bring copies of, but towns are really complaining about having to clean out scour holes because of its extreme cost to the town. We received an FRWA letter, the Inland Wetlands Commission received an FRW letter recommending engineered low-tech stormwater runoff landscape features when possible, and to seek expertise in the field to determine. Again, referring back to the site walk, which the parties were willing to take with me on November 21st, I requested, if natural infiltration not possible, to reduce the imprint of the curbing, increase the size of the scour hole, and increase the length of the swale. Again, on my memo dated November 24th, all the details are within. This handout also was given to all the people that were at the site walk, which included our enforcement agent, the inland's chairman, WMC Engineering, the DOT, and our first selectman. And Meehan, Rich Meehan from Meehan and Meehan. Bullet number 5 on the stormwater runoff is that I'm seeing WMC, which is a very highly respected engineering firm, and I'm seeing REMA Ecological Services, who are a very respected service, at opposite ends of the spectrum as to what should be done with this lower portion of the stormwater runoff. I would say, would it not be prudent for the Inland Wetlands Commission to seek an unbiased expert in the field, such as the HVA, the Housatonic Valley Association, or the DEEP, or the CEQ, to review the situation before approving a design with wetland impacts, sure to add costs to the town, and with a high probability of potential private property damage? I think we would be prudent to cover or dot our i's and cross our t's before we approve something that might become a liability. In general, I believe that WMC Engineering is providing a good product for the primary project goal to replace a bridge and guardrails on a town road. Unfortunately, I see two main reasons for the challenges involved with the expansion of the project. Number one, the umbrella on funding sources has their set of rules. Number two, the road safety issues are based on skewed information and paint a false picture characterizing the road. Very regrettably, we have an application pending approval in our Wetlands Commission being controlled by the ominous specter of town liability and road concerns. I believe the DOT staff statements at the November 21st site walk that the town is the applicant and welcome to modify the plan as they wish. I do not believe that funding is in jeopardy by doing. I know judgment and prudence exist, and public hearings are an opportunity to evaluate alternatives. The design speed of 45 miles per hour being reduced to 25 miles per hour is one example of a standard that was waived. Others can be waived as well, and I'm sure I have had in the past been waived by the DOT and the federal projects. I've spoken to many engineering firms and many attorneys, and they say that for sure there are waivers for other projects in the past that can be also be done for this project. Looking at the history or project of the project and characterization of the road, we have a bridge replacement project approved by the federal government in 2011, application 6176, funded for just over $1 million at 80% federal funding and 20% town. The same project was approved by the Connecticut state government agencies in 2012. The town of Hartland voted on the same project twice, August of 2011 and September of 2013. The project reads as follows, and also is on an exhibit, which is the State of Connecticut Department of Transportation dated March 27, 2012. It's all documented in here. And for the expert for the project description, the proposal scope of this project, and this is in quotes, is to replace the entire structure with a clear span natural bottom bridge. The work required for this replacement will require removal of the existing structure excavation of about 100 feet of roadway on both sides of the structure for full depth pavement replacement and installation of new appropriate guide rail, end quote. At a public information meeting on March 20th, 2014, WMC informed us of a much more expansive project, doubling not only the size, but the cost to $1.9 million. Again, at 80% federally funded and 20% town funded, with major added temporary and permanent significant impacts to the wetland. The project reads as follows, and is also in the same handout on the back page. Quote, both the existing roadway and bridge curb-to-curb widths will be increased from 20 feet to 24 feet. Approximately 480 linear feet of roadway reconstruction, including the bridge, will be done. The roadway profile will be raised by 2 feet in the vicinity of the bridge to provide a flatter vertical sag curve and improve the design speed from 20 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour. The stopping site distance will be improved by cutting and regrading the road embankment at station 6+50 right to provide a widened shoulder or site shelf. Today, I received an email with the project again being documented and describing the project at an estimated cost of $2,600,4100. That's very, very steep, and that's also at an 80-20 cost to the town. In your folder here, you'll see the DEP approvals, and the environmental review from the DEP, as far as I can see, is based on the bridge replacement.
The third page, you're talking about raising the road 2 feet. Okay. What I'm wondering, and excuse me for perhaps being naive, but perhaps the answer is public safety. I don't know, but why does the road need to be raised at all?
Well, it's the vertical curvature. Vertical curvature is a sag right now for people driving faster, so the design standard's less, so when you reduce that curvature to be smoother, it raises the low
That
point
would
of
slow
curvature.
people down if you raise the road?
No, it's for the design speed.
It's the design speed.
Yes, people driving, if you're driving fast and there's a road that dips like that, your car goes boom. It's similar to that. We're smoothing that out, so we're trying to make that less bump. We're trying to smooth it out to the design.
So the idea is that if you're going 45 miles an hour and you hit that bump, your
That
car will
bump,
be a little bit off the road maybe, and you lose control.
Yeah, we're doing it for 25 miles. But when people are traveling 45 or whatever.
Whereas if you had a more smooth run vertically, people would just go 45 miles an hour or whatever speed they're
Whatever
going.
speed they're driving.
And they wouldn't lose control of the car
It's improved vertical
at
jump.
the height, at the same speed.
And you're advocating more than 2 feet? I mean, for
And it's only one spot.
It's only at the,
And you can show the profile.
let me show the profile on the bridge.
Yeah, with that maximum height, I think it was, right?
This is the profile right now. Coming down the hill, there's 9%. So this is the sag we're talking about, just upstream of the bridge.
And that's at the
This-
steepest point is 2 feet.
This vertical curve in here meets the 25 mile per hour
Right.
design speed.
And you're talking about reducing the vertical sag by 2 feet at the most extreme place?
At the bridge, it's gonna be less than 1 foot at the bridge.
Okay,
The roadway elevation at the bridge.
Okay, at the bridge, right.
Yeah, here, it's gonna be a little bit more. At the highest fill area, you're talking 2 feet.
Okay, so that's the 2 feet you're talking about then. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And there's no more than 2 feet?
No. Nope.
No.
No, this is at the center line, which is the highest.
I had a question, is Susan over here?
Yeah.
You kept mentioning waivers, possible waivers that other bridge projects have. Could you be specific on any of those?
Well, I'd be surprised if there were other federally funded bridge projects that have had waivers of less than 24 feet
Oh, is that what you meant, the width waiver?
Well, that,
Uh-huh.
and sightline waivers,
Okay.
you know, this, yeah, that's
Is
exactly.
that what you meant for
Yeah.
the design
Design-
guidelines, right, the width
Design
and
guidelines.
the
They're only
vertical and the
design
horizontal?
guidelines
Right.
and standards.
Okay.
They can be waived, and often, and I can't say often are, but are under the credible conditions.
Based
But
on,
if the character of the road was described properly, instead of this textbook type of thing, which is inaccurate, I think you'll find that there are other projects with waivers that can be applied to this
just
project.
justified by the rural quality of the road as well as the
They
traffic
documented,
count that
they
would.
documented,
I'm just trying to be more specific about what you were talking about. You're talking about design requirement waivers
right,
based on the rural character of the road and based on the traffic count?
the safety features of the road, traffic counts, traffic accidents, and just the nature
It's
of the road.
it's your belief that there are other waivers, but you
Yeah,
don't.
it's
have anything
strange to read
specific, yeah.
Connecticut State traffic study that had looked at the entire road and measured it 16 to 18 feet plus or minus throughout the road, and then to hear that we have to put in a 24-inch, 24-foot road. I could understand a 24-foot bridge, but not the expanse of.
Excuse me. I just wanted to clarify the question so that I would know if you're going to put like a look where you're talking about other projects where such waivers have occurred.
Well, I asked the DOT for that information a couple of months ago, and I never received a call back. So, I have spoken to other professional people that feel that.
It's possible, but you don't know of
I
any
don't have
specific-
firsthand an example of
Okay,
it.
yeah.
I could waste the rest of my next week on doing that.
No, I just wondered, if you have, excuse me, you have one that we could look at, but you're not sure.
I don't have.
I think we have a gentleman right there.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
First, just to introduce myself, I'm Mark Burns. I work for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. I'm the project engineer for the Federal Local Bridge Program. And to answer Mrs. Murray's questions, yes, waivers are possible for design exceptions. However, at this point, we are beyond that phase. I received design approval from management subsequent to the public informational meeting regarding the design. We cannot make any waivers to the design width at this point in
And
time.
that's the current design, not the original design that.
That's with the 24-foot width.
I'm sorry, what?
That's for the 24-foot width. That was what was signed off on by our department management. We cannot veer and we cannot go and get waivers for sightlines or widths at this point. To do that would set this project back a substantial amount of time and cost both the town and the state a significant amount of money.
What date did that end? What was the
We
date?
had design approval on May 22nd following the public informational meeting on March 20th. If there was an issue, we would have had to go back in March to get it. During the public informational meeting, if there was a lot of opposition to the design of the project. But because there wasn't, the design approval was moved forward with concurrence
That was a
from the town.
30% design?
That was at 30%.
I'm sorry, there was a lot of opposition to the design at that time, and I wrote letters, and we had some communication regarding that. Nothing was done.
I got a question for you. If
Yes.
the road, is it possible, I'm just throwing this out, is a wild and scenic road or a scenic road, then your standards are more apt to be waived? If
If
it's
it's
designated?
designated as a state scenic road, then yes.
Yeah, and how involved is that? I don't even know if the town would
To
want
do that, you have to go before the Scenic Road Advisory Committee, you'd have to put an application
Yep.
forward. There's a lot of documentation process.
Would
towards
that
it.
change the status of what we could do here at this point, or?
At this point, we're locked in. The only things that could
If
change.
you wanted to proceed on schedule, correct?
Correct.
And if you did not proceed on schedule, what kind of delay would, in your professional opinion, this incur?
Steve, design time of changing the design?
Design time's not in the critical path. It would be going back and getting the design approval. Design itself can be changed fairly quickly.
Correct.
If, you know, I'm not talking going to 18 feet, I mean, they'll be going from 24 to 22 feet. We've already got the waivers we've got in terms of the design speed. I mean, we're lucky to get that, to be honest with you. But to change the width by 2 feet, to change the design is not a big deal. We shouldn't sit, putting Dennis in the spot here, he's got to do it. But the process to go back through.
Could take several months. I don't have an exact timetable, but design exceptions meetings are not held on a regular basis with the department. It's an agenda-based process. So say perchance if this was the only one on there, they may not decide to hold a meeting. It could take a long span of time. I can't give an adequate.
If time were no issue at all, and say this was designated just magically a scenic road, what is with the current bridge that exists there, what's the smallest that you guys would even allow for speed and for bridge width?
24 feet.
So, and what is the slowest that the DOT would allow for a speed limit on that road for design, period, regardless if it's scenic or not scenic?
That's at the town's discretion, because it's a town road.
I think you're talking about design.
Oh, design speed?
Yeah. What, that you guys would allow? Because currently it's at.
They've allowed 25.
It's allowed at 25.
And the rest of the road is what, 25?
25, we really can't go.
So we wouldn't go, you wouldn't allow it to go slower than the current speed. So the sight line that you guys currently have approved for is for 25 miles an hour, not for the 40.
Correct.
So even if we went and got the scenic exemption, and even if you let us have 2 feet less of a bridge, we'd still have to cut all those trees because you wouldn't let us go with any less of a sight line if we're gonna approve it.
Unless there was a waiver, which could take.
Would you allow, but I'm saying it standardly as
Which
a waiver.
that's all contingent if my management signs off on a waiver.
I understand, but it's
That's-
not concrete that it's just gonna like be 24. There is a possibility of a
Correct.
waiver, no matter how minute, correct?
Very minute.
And if there was a waiver and it was allowed to be 22 foot, what would the difference in impact be between 22 foot width and 24 foot width? In terms of wetlands.
Not so bad. The preferred alternative, that red line, if we change that center line of the road to be closer, all you're doing is moving that in a foot, this in a foot. Yeah, right.
So
And that's saving much.
So there really, the proposed do nothing as is plan is off the table, correct? Which would just be.
18 foot wide or whatever.
Well, it's 21 feet here and 21 feet here,
Okay.
the roadway. So, and 20 feet, it's a mishmash in here. The bridge is 20 feet.
Yeah,
Bridge
but
narrows.
Wouldn't it be true that you can get a waiver on the sight lines and not take out an embankment that's a temporary and permanent wetland impact?
The embankment's in the upland review area, so it'd be an upland review area impact, not a wetland watercourse impact?
It is a temporary and permanent impact to the wetlands.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we have a question back here.
Yeah, actually,
What's your name for the
clarification.
record?
My name is Robert Kosker. I work for Close, Jensen, and Miller. We are liaison service. We assist DOT in administering the federal local bridge program, of which this bridge is a part of. And I just want to kind of clarify, we all know that the intent of this project is to address a structurally deficient bridge. And basically, it is a town-administered project, so essentially your town is applying to its own wetlands commission for this permit. I would like to point out, though, that we've already had several design exceptions approved just by virtue of getting that 25-mile-an-hour design speed approved. Right now, the embankment we're talking about, and I think it's already been stated, but we're not talking about increasing sightline for an increase in the existing design speed. The existing design speed is basically 25 miles an hour. It's what it's posted for. We just want to bring it up so that it meets what your roadway is posted for. 25-mile-an-hour design speed. These are things that the department and I think the town can't close its eyes to when looking at designing these bridges. You know, just addressing the structural implications and not looking at safety issues. In fact, I think they'd be irresponsible in doing so. With respect to width, there is a difference between what Federal Highway Administration considers functional adequacy. That means, is the bridge wide enough to handle the traffic volume? I'm not certain about, we're talking about 1997 traffic study, nearly 20 years ago, but regardless, we've had recent counts, I think as recent as 2013, with physical counters out there that state fairly unequivocally that the traffic volume out there is a little bit over 400 vehicles per day on an average basis. This is fairly consistent with what's been reported in years past on the DOT's bridge database, basically. So I think the design that we have here is quite appropriate, and we are, I wouldn't say that the modifications we're making to the roadway embankment are to increase it or to improve it beyond what it's supposed to be designed for. I mean, we already have an exception here to all kinds of things like specifically minimum radius. There should be a specific minimum radius to meet the design speed that this should be, which is beyond 25 miles an hour. By virtue of getting a waiver for the design speed, you actually have inherently gained waivers to several other geometric design elements, and one of them being the maximum gradient on the roadway. You know, for this type of roadway, your maximum, absolute maximum gradient is supposed to be 13%. We're up at almost 17%. And we're basically just bringing that down to about 15.5%.
The area of the bridge.
Yeah, we did get a waiver for that item as well, so
without the vertical correction,
right.
it'd be up higher, more like 16-17%.
Yeah, basically right now, your roadway, you've got it posted for 25 miles an hour, it's only good for 20 miles an hour, we're just trying to bring it up to what it's posted for. I don't want to make more of this than it is, it's just providing sight line for that. So it's good for what it says it is.
So this is a distinction between functional design and what else you mentioned?
Oh, yes, I maybe didn't finish that thought. The design standards, which are also dictated by the federal government, and
Those are separate.
those are separate. Those are geometric standards. The functional standards are basically say, this is the absolute minimum width you can have
Right.
for the traffic volume you have out there.
Thank you.
It's not a desirable in any way, and it's not even an optimum width. It's the absolute bare minimum
Which is?
you're going to go to. That's 22 feet. 24 feet is what's required by design standards. That's the element we'd have to get a waiver for. And under the program under which we operate, we can get waivers programmatically for secondary geometric elements such as the ones we're talking about. Gradient, curvature, even design speed. But one that is absolutely hard and fast that would be extremely difficult to get a waiver to would be the width, because you're building this for 75 years. And, you know, that's what both the department and the federal government looks at when they're spending money, you know. And they're saying, why would I want to cheat 2 feet for a bridge that's going to be out there for at least 75 years, possibly 100 years? So, you know, with all that considered, this design is absolutely appropriate, I think. But again, it is the town's project, and, you know, I think the town has to ultimately make the decision, and I think they've endorsed the project as designed, or, you know, and basically put it forth in the application you have before you.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on to Ian? Sir?
Hi, well, again, for the record, I'm Richard Meehan from Meehan and Gooden Engineers, Surveyors in Manchester, Connecticut. I want to commend, first off, I want to commend Mr. McDowell and WMC for their professionalism, their patience through this whole thing. And by the way, their inclusiveness. They were invited to a field meeting that took place on November 23rd. I want to thank you for the opportunity to have Mr. Cosper there, and I think Mr. Byrne as well. It was a great meeting, was very productive. But that being said, we do disagree with WMC on several points. I'm just going to talk about them briefly, and we'll just cut to a chase, I hope. We condemn, I think we said this before, that their application does not conform to the requirements of your application processes. They contend that they're unlike other applicants, that they're a different class of applicant. They're the town. And I've looked through your regulations, and I haven't seen anywhere where they define another class of applicant. You're an applicant or you're not. But let's go set that aside. That's just one piece of the controversy. The plan to replace a culvert should be simple. I've heard this a couple of times. It should be a very simple process. Shouldn't be any big deal. But yet it's spawned all this multifaceted debate. The professionals here, the experts here from Remo Ecological Services have told you there's going to be irrevocable harm to the wetlands and the brook if you proceed with the plan that's under consideration. The state, or excuse me, WMC has said, no, that's not true. They've said that if you don't do these improvements to the road, farther up the road, you're going to be liable in case there's an accident. And I think Ms. Murray has just stated on this public record that she feels, and I think common sense would tell you that if you do make those improvements, people are going to come faster. And that is also going to cause an accident. And if you think that you can avoid an attorney just because you don't do an improvement any easier than you can avoid an attorney if you do make an improvement, you're wrong. We're all wrong, because regardless if we do, regardless if we don't. So the discussion is even dragged into the maintenance or the lack thereof of the town roads, or the policing of the town roads. If it was a 25-mile-an-hour road and people are going 41, aren't there more tickets? That sort of business. And the truth is that all this back and forth boils down to one small issue. And I'd like to show it to you. This is a copy, I've taken it from WMC, and this is a copy of the initial report from 2012 done by Close, Jensen, and Miller describing the project. This is the project that was approved back when it was going to be a $1.1 million project, I think it was. And it says the proposed scope of the project, she's already read it, will be project to replace the entire structure with a clear span natural bottom bridge. The work required for this replacement will require the removal of the existing structure, excavation of about 100 feet of roadway on both sides of the structure for full pavement depth, pavement and replacement, and installation of a new appropriate guardrail. I've taken the liberty of marking that area. Here's the bridge, here's an area 100 feet to the north, area 100 feet to the south. And that's this green area that I'm showing on this plan. What's under dispute here is the 250 feet going up the hill and taking down this hill, the 250 feet going that way. And we've heard all the reasons why it has to be there. The federal government says so, the state says so. This reminds me of like going to the hospital. You need an aspirin, you ask a nurse for an aspirin, you can see the bill that your insurance company pays. It's like $120 for an aspirin. That's the $120 aspirin. This is the $1,600 wrench that gets sold to the Navy. Just because you want to do a small, simple project. 100 feet of improvements, either side of the road, and replacement of the bridge. And I'm telling you that based upon this statement by DOT that was originally approved by the town, and just the shape of the bridge and where the fill is going. The fill, by the way, the 2 foot, the sag fill is going to be, it's in that orange area. It's not in the green area. And I asked this question at the meeting on the 23rd. And I asked the question, I said, look, we were standing at the top of the hill, is when Ms. Murray said, can we move the road over 3 or 4 feet? And I said, let me ask you a question. I had everybody there. I said, why can't we just stop 100 feet from the bridge? I didn't even know that DOT had said that back then. Why can't we just stop 100 feet from the bridge and not take this hill down? And I got a very honest answer. We got it here tonight. Said, because we've come this far. It's too late to turn back now. I don't know, but I've heard that before. I'll leave you to your own opinion as to whether or not that should be impetus for doing something that the professionals will say will irrevocably harm the wetlands and will also cause some safety concerns. All of the arguments, none of the arguments, everybody agrees the bridge, the culvert needs to be replaced. Everybody agrees there should be guardrails. What we don't agree on is 250, 250. Plain and simple. That's my presentation.
When did the initial plan become no longer a plan?
I beg your pardon?
When did the initial plan become no longer a plan? I mean,
How did it evolve?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was notified at the public information meeting that the plan had changed to the current plan, and that was March of 2014?
Yes.
Yeah.
14.
2014. All along, I've gone to the town special meetings regarding the bridge. We voted twice, as I said, and we were voting on this proposal. It was said that we know nothing else. We have to wait until the engineering goes to the 70% finished product to see what they will provide. So until March of 2014, this was the plan. And
Well, it
then,
sounds like, maybe I'm wrong on this, this was the idea that something needed to be
This
done in
was
this
the-
area, and this is the plan to accomplish.
this was a plan that was provided to the DEEP for their environmental sign-offs.
No, it was just a description, I thought.
Was it a plan?
It was a description.
Just a description?
Well, yeah, the
Replacement of the
description.
culvert.
So
Project
it wasn't
description.
actually an engineered design, it was a plan or a description of what they were
It was
proposing to
written
do.
by Closure. Tim Timberland wrote that. And that was the letter that was presented to Mark Burns, is that correct? In March of 2012.
I wasn't
Or
in this.
Signed off March 27th by somebody in the DOT. I have, the documentation is in your folder.
Well, the
Okay,
point
it's
is
one of my
that
handouts.
a 25-cent aspirin has become a $112 aspirin.
But the point is that was the original concept, but it hadn't been engineered yet.
No, it was 30% engineered, as far as I know.
I'm sorry.
That, you know, I think, when did you come on board?
Can I respond to that,
Yeah.
please? Again, for record, my name is Dennis Garceau. I work with WMC Consulting Engineers, project manager on the project. The document she's talking about, it was basically early on in the funding process. It was just based on a design concept. So that was prior to any detailed survey that was done on the existing conditions of the site, any detailed studies that were performed, and detailed engineering that was performed. So that was way prior to us coming on board and doing the design work, which initiated in 2013.
There were some boring samples I remember we were
Yes,
involved with, and this was before that as
It
well.
was even before that,
Okay.
correct.
But this was a plan until it was presented to the public in March of 2014.
The
The
professional
project
preliminary
description-
engineering report states otherwise. We had the same roadway geometry and alignment that we presented to the town with the 3 bridge alternatives that we described in the first public hearing meeting. 2,
And that was done,
those
Prior to
Ps are
30%.
prior to 30%. 30% is what we present to the public in the public hearing after the town looks at
that
this.
was in October of 2013. So,
No, I was told at the public information meeting that that project was at 70% complete. We had approved $36,000 at a town meeting to go the next step to your 70% complete.
But I think the important part is that, you know, I can had less impact, we'd all be very happy. But this is not a finished plan that we can vote on or even do as a reasonable or prudent alternative. There's nothing here that I can use to say, geez, you know, can we use this idea instead?
You're correct.
You know, so I guess the point is, we need to move forward with the proposal that we have in front of us.
That's the bottom line.
Right.
One more quick
You know,
thing
that,
also,
you know.
in the difference in the two plans. Again, as Dennis stated, that was done for, I think, a grant application process with no information, no traffic studies, no survey, no borings, no wetlands delineation. It was basically to get a grant for the town, okay? Subsequent to that, when the design started to take place and get to the 30% stage to go to the public information meeting, that's when we decided, we had looked at the alignment, we had all the survey information, we knew what the traffic was, we tried to minimize the wetland impact as much as we can with extensive retaining walls, et cetera. The project cost went up as a result of it. The reason the project cost went up was to avoid wetlands, quite honestly. If wetlands weren't an issue here, the project costs wouldn't be where they are. The whole purpose of that, and again, cost is not your issue, I believe, that's for us in the town to worry about. The purpose of the whole thing was to avoid wetland impacts as much as possible.
So when someone says it's 30% engineered, that really refers to the stage that it's in. It's kind of like a birth, it's a development, to adolescence.
Exactly right.
Okay, so
The
30%.
plans are done enough that we can go to the public and present it and say, here's what the plan is. Based on all the information we've gathered to date, here's what the alternative is that we're proposing.
And this isn't even 0% design,
No.
it's just concept.
That's not even 0%.
That's not even a design, that's their plan. I just took and measured 200.
He colored on it.
No, I'm talking about the written description.
Oh, the written description, right, exactly.
The written description,
That was not a design, it was just a concept.
That's correct.
It's a concept.
In order to try to come up with a ballpark cost to be able to get a grant, an 80% grant for the town.
Okay, I think we got that
But
clear.
this concept was sent to the DEEP for their environmental sign-off.
No,
I
That's
have
not
the
correct.
records.
that's not correct.
That's correct.
It's in the handouts.
Well, again, Bob Kosker for Close, Jensen and Miller. Possibly that description was sent at the environmental screening stage prior to any formal design to the DOT's Office of Environmental Planning. DEP has no jurisdiction here. This is a local permitted project. There's no flood zone present here, no FEMA map flood zone. And we've also gone through all the screening required to ensure that the conditions of the National Environmental Policy Act and the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act have been satisfied. And thus it meets all the requirements for satisfying those two acts. And that's one of the documents that possibly Susan is referring to as a sign-off by DOT Office of Environmental Planning. Nothing's
correct.
gone to DEEP
Right,
on
I'm sorry,
this.
it was
But
the
this was
environmental.
Doesn't you, the NEDB and the fisheries go through?
Fisheries has, yes.
And the National Biodiversity.
And what is the purpose of that sign off, just an initial screening you mentioned?
Yeah.
What does that mean
It's
exactly?
to ensure that if there are potential rare and endangered or species of special concern in the area, that they are identified, and the DEP would then say, okay, we want you to go out there and do an actual physical survey with a biologist or whomever to determine whether those species are present, and if so, how we're going to handle them during construction.
Yeah, and just one correction to my previous statement. We also go to DEP's Inland Fisheries Division with what we're proposing to make sure that whatever we do there is consistent with their policies.
And you did that on this case?
And in this
also
case,
on
we've
initial-
got that sign off and everything, so.
And even though that was on the earlier conceptual concept.
Right.
It would not be different if you,
Fisheries is looking for the bridge type that you're putting in with respect to bottom conditions. And they generally prefer, well, they do prefer natural bottoms as opposed to unnatural bottoms, which we have in the present conditions. So, yeah, we,
so do you want to continue with anything?
I'm done.
Okay. Is there anything, yes, sir?
A couple things. Mr. Means stated that we're proposing that the town should be treated as a different class of applicant. We're not proposing or asking that whatsoever. What we're saying is that the project is managed in a different fashion from a private development project. In effect, receives far more scrutiny during construction than would a private development. That's what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting the town should be treated any different than anybody else for this commission.
We discussed that.
And I don't disagree with what he just said. I do not disagree with what he just said. My point was that you are the people who are supposed to be reviewing the final plans, not them. That's all. It's a point.
May I ask what the total cost of this project is now?
2.6 million
2.6 million.
estimated.
Well, the construction cost is 1.99.
1.9 million is construction.
How much?
1.9
1 point.
That's an estimate
estimate.
at this stage.
But what is the 2.6 million on your
It
paperwork?
includes all design costs, construction engineering, administration, rights-of-way. There'll be some rights-of-ways that need to be obtained.
The cost of the project then is up to 2.6
Potentially, yes.
million, is that right?
That's correct.
Is that based on a 2016 start date, or what is it based on?
Yes.
So we're looking at a $500,000 cost to the town. Has that been voted on?
No.
Certain things have been voted on. I don't believe that's right.
Yeah, no, it hasn't come from the town yet. That's,
The money's been appropriated for up to a certain, I think, wage slap. but up to a cer-
200,000. We voted on the $1.1 million project.
Okay.
And,
I'm not sure if that's the case.
yeah, we had, and we voted again a few years later on a $36,000 payment for the next step of the engineering. Those were the two votes that we had.
okay, I'm
The town
sorry.
knows about the $1.1 million.
Again, I think the costs are,
I'm sorry, can we just close this part of it?
Yeah,
Because
sorry.
we're not really supposed to be discussing the money value of it all. And, you know, I know they're all, everything is related, safety is related, money's related, it's all related, but we're trying to clarify what our purpose is here. And so if there's anything else pertinent to the wetlands.
Yes. Well, let me ask you a question. This is George Logan, Ecological Services.
Okay.
I noticed that it's going on to court.
Yeah, I'd like
You
to-
folks want to have a comfort
Okay, sorry,
break?
what?
You need to take a break.
No, let's, we
Okay.
need to get this.
Me too, and I live farther away. I'm going to borrow one of their plans, if that's okay with you. Where is the preferred design and color? Talking about the same thing, thanks. So this is what's to be voted on. So I figure we should be looking at that.
And again, could you explain what, George, could you please explain your interest and your
Sure.
involvement is in this project?
Correct. As you might recall, there's a couple of memos in the record back in October that were produced by us, Ecological Services. Sigmund's been before you a couple of times. I wasn't able to until today. As a matter of fact, I should be here today, but I drove all through the night from a southern state so that I could be here, and unfortunately I'm feeling it right now, so I'm a little on the slow side. What we've done tonight is a couple of things. There's a report which kind of summarizes everything we have said so far, but with an emphasis to sort of a rebuttal, if you will, to what WMC has put in the record, which does not only affect us and Richard Ian's company, but also affects us. But before I do that, and this is, I believe, important, is to give you a copy of our professional resumes. The reason for that is because, as you probably have heard before, that's one for Sigurd and one for me. I also gave a set to the applicant's side.
John, could you put these on the record? I think there's only one copy.
The reason for doing that, obviously, we need to know what our qualifications are. Because, as you know, probably from case studies that you've seen, from court cases, etc., it matters what you base your decision on. So if one side has experts that say certain things, you almost have to follow what they say unless the other side has an expert of equal qualifications that says something different, then you choose to believe them rather than us. So it puts us in an interesting position of saying things regarding this application. What I'm not going to do is give you the report now, because I want to go through this fast and open it to questions, and then you'll have, hopefully, the time that you need to review it.
But you're going to be submitting that report tonight, though, right?
I'll be submitting it tonight after I'm done, because what I'm going to try to do is to summarize it instead of go page by page and say, okay, I'm trying to get to some of the main points, and then maybe spur some discussion and questions. If by that time, we're hopefully.
What you intend to give out, is that the same as the one we have here?
No, this is a new report.
What is this?
That's my qualifications. My
Oh,
resume.
all right.
See, I'm telling you, I'm a little slow tonight. I have a humongous headache right now, but that's my problem. So anyhow, we've scrutinized this, we've given you our opinion in the previous two reports. I think we emphasize the fact that we're not only looking at direct physical impacts upon the watercourse and the wetlands, which are 2,000 plus square feet, that we also look not only at the upland review area and what's happening within 200 feet of the watercourse and the wetlands, but that we're also looking at anything that's contributing from a perspective of stormwater, from a new design to said brook. And so, even though we're more than 200 feet up in some of these areas, it's important. So we've emphasized the fact that the impact on we call it the northeastern embankment, is important because it right now provides functions that protect the brook. We've told you that there are certain ways that the water now reaches the brook that, apart from the fact that there had been some early erosion, is a preferable way of having sheet flow that's coming off the edge of the gentler, if you will, sections of the site and coming down to the brook, where the sheet flow now goes through soils and vegetation rather than directing it via curbing to a scour hole. Now, obviously, I'm not a designer. I'm just a reviewer that is trying to make sense of what's going here and trying to come to the point of saying, yes, the applicant, and this is the important part, has chosen the feasible and prudent alternative. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the feasible and prudent alternative test. So I'll tell you what your regulations say. The regulations say, and when you folks come to the point where you have to make a decision, yay or nay, based on what's been put before you, you're going to have to look at the decision for criteria. One of them, which is pretty high up in the list, basically says that you have to look at any feasible prudent alternatives to the proposed regulated activity, which alternatives will cause less or no environmental impacts to the wetlands or watercourses. So what you don't see here in your regulations is anything to do with safety.
Why should there be?
Because you're looking at the actual,
purview.
you're looking at the impacts, physical, direct or indirect, to the actual wetlands and watercourses. So your regulations are blind to safety. And what is happening here by this federal stat mandate that we've heard is that this project is forcing safety upon your regulations, where your regulations are not really intended to do that. So what you need to do is to look strictly as to whether or not the applicant has given you, based on the record, met the feasible prudent alternative test of providing a feasible prudent alternative that has reduced the impacts to the extent possible. So now the next thing you're going to probably go is tell me, well, there's other stuff in the regulations regarding feasible prudent. And according to your regulations, and this is not just your regulations, obviously it's model regulations, it says the feasible means able to be constructed or implemented consistent with some engineering principles. Okay, we can all agree with that. And prudent means economically or otherwise reasonable in light of the social benefits, I'm going to emphasize that for a second, to be derived from the proposed regulated activity, provided costs may be considered in deciding what is prudent, and further provided we are showing an expense will not necessarily mean an alternative is imprudent, which is basically what Steve McDonald was saying a little earlier. And so the key thing here, which you might question, is social benefits. Well, the social benefits are tied to the activity itself. In most cases, and this is a little different, in most cases there's something new that's being proposed that wasn't there before. So you're going to say, well, they're crossing this broken wetland because they want to get to the good land and build the five lot subdivision. So the social benefit is that they're providing residential housing, so the activity is tied to that. They have to cross to get to the good land. In this particular case, the social benefit is already there. We have already crossed years ago the stream, and so the social benefit of being able to go back and forth on this road is already there. So what the prudent, feasible, prudent alternative needs to do is to preserve that social benefit, the social benefit of crossing this. So when I started looking at this, the thing that I was trying to focus is not just what's going on here as far as the 2,000 plus or minus square feet of direct wetland impacts and it would be temporary, but also what's happening in the entire corridor. And could I envision a feasible prudent alternative whereby the impacts remain about the same as far as the direct, but the indirect ones are being reduced? By indirect ones I mean the thermal impacts and the water quality impacts and the other impacts which are offered by limiting the amount of buffer that's being taken down. So when, obviously this would be ideal, but it's probably not reasonable, because that's just a concept, it's not a plan. And I think that's what Richard was trying to say. So again, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not, or a designer, I'm a scientist. So I can't tell you exactly what I would have done in order to design this in a way that limits the impacts. I think that's their job. But I can tell you that I can envision certain things. For instance, and unfortunately we get into minutia when we start asking these questions. Part of the reason that the bank is being compromised, which I believe is creating some benefits to the stream, both now and hopefully in the future, it's not just because they're raising the road a little bit and they have to change the geometry, because as you might have remembered, by following the red lines, which we don't have around here, the road more or less follows the red lines, except, and I don't want to mess their plans, but can I use this for a pointer? Sure. Here's the edge of the road now. And you know that we're right from the edge of the road where we have vegetation and there's a bank. But now they're going from here, right through here, all the way to the bank. And you can see that there's some differences here also, where here's the edge of the road, but they're not only going here, but they're also going all the way down. So it's not just the edge of the road. What they've done here is I wouldn't call it the standard, but a standard way of looking at it, which is an engineering approach, which might not be the best management approach or low impact development approach for this particular replacement of the bridge. So they've created a fairly wide swale that they know is going to be there for a long time. But it's going to slow down the water because they're dealing with a steep slope here. We set up to 17%, particularly right here. And they're slowing down the water, and then they're stepping it down, having a couple of check dams, and getting it all the way to the road. Well, from a velocity and scouring effect, that's a great solution. It doesn't do much for us as far as water quality, and doesn't do much for us with the bank. And one of the reasons that bank is compromised, not the only reason, is because of that swale. And we could say something similar on that side. And then, of course, we have this situation where we're putting our water along the curb over to a scar hole.
Sorry, but Is there any way
getting
you
into-
can wrap this up in like 5
Correct.
minutes? We really want to put the end of this public hearing. I think you're the last piece of it. So if we have a lot of this little detail in the report,
No, I'm just giving
that'd be
you,
fine.
I give you an example of the reasons why some of these happening, why they could have come up with different designs that didn't need all this magnanimous kind of swales. But they're completely unnecessary as far as I'm concerned. There are other solutions they could have had. But
Well,
the
without a design concept that's realistic, it's only a possible. It's not, we can do this. And that's where we have an issue, because we're not engineers either.
Correct.
So if you come to me and say, here's the
There's a
perfect
better
solution,
alternative.
but I don't have the design, and I can't promise you there is a functioning design, you give me this, it puts us in a tough position. Because we understand we'd all like it as minimal as possible, but you don't have a compatible design with you, and I'm sure it's cost prohibitive, but.
Well, it's not a cost prohibitive, but again, I'm not a designer. I can't do that, or else I'll be reporting to some other
And I
agency.
understand that, but I assume.
But what I'm saying is from a-
You're representing people who asked you for your opinion,
Right.
is that correct?
And my opinion is that they don't have to take that bank down, that they could have another way, means of bringing the water to this area,
What
quite
would
it
be
there
an
and treat it.
alternate means of bringing the water to that area?
They're not gonna wanna hear that, but
Well,
they're
no, I'm
already,
asking you.
but they're already showing. Yeah,
You
sure.
are an expert,
Yeah.
and you're into water. In your professional opinion,
If-
what would be a better alternative to bring that water to the brook?
Well, they could have had one structure and curbing, for instance. I'm not
Curbing,
saying that that's
okay.
gonna be.
What do you
But
mean
if you
one-
look at this
What do
bank.
you mean one structure and curbing?
They're cutting the bank for sightline. They have to cut the bank to have the 25
But
miles an hour.
that's safety.
Well, that's part of the project.
And that's not part of your regulations for you to look at
Doesn't
safety.
matter. Are we
You
gonna
have to
build
look
that
at-
and not cut that bank
But
down?
you see, you're thinking like an engineer.
No, I'm not. Yes, you are. You put one house on that watershed, you got more damage. Cut your talk.
You're thinking like an engineer, which you are. I'm an environmentalist, I'm a
No,
wetland
no,
scientist.
just realistically, what's the size of the water?
I don't know.
To the brook, okay. What's the size of the square footage it's disturbing?
Is there any scour there now along the
Yes.
edge of this particular slope? The answer is no.
Yes, there
Oh.
is.
Take a look, it's further down.
George, I'm sorry, George.
Right on the hill, too.
Down there.
16% grade.
This is a picture of that scout hole before that was repaired.
Well, that's down here.
No,
That's down here. I'm not arguing this, I'm saying this. How are you bringing the water down there? That's deposition of some sand, that's not scour.
Okay. I disagree.
Well, okay, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, I could have found a solution of doing
I
something
see erosion,
here
but it's okay.
and doing a little bit of riprap right at the edge if
Well, it's
need
easy to
be,
pick
so that
things
it's not
apart. I
any
guess
erosion.
what we're looking for you as the expert is to help us to request a better solution. And I'm not hearing, what I would like to know from you
Yes.
is, we have to, obviously, they, with their design, want to fix the road, okay? With the design that's up there, is there a better solution on how to handle that water with that design?
Yes, but the problem is I'm disagreeing with the design
But
because
I'm
it comes
asking
back
you,
to
but
safety.
that's not my question. My question is, with this current design, is there a better way to handle the water?
Yes.
And would be better for the brook, then what is that?
Well, I can't design it complete with them, I just gave you an idea. All they needed to do for not taking this bank out for other reasons than, with the geometry, which you're talking about, is to put a little riprap in the areas that they think are, picking up speed right at the edge of the road without taking this entire bank until they get down here. And then they can do something a little bit better over here where they can have some scour holes and stepping it down. They're still gonna have the same idea of catching the sediment, quieting
So
down
you
the water.
wouldn't, the basic design of putting riprap along the sides with a trail and doing a scour hole at the end is kind of, I'm hearing that you're saying that you would do roughly the same thing.
But it will be a little armament
It
which
would
would
just
not
be smaller.
require to take.
It would be small.
Correct.
But you would do roughly the same idea.
Similar. It would have to be, because I don't disagree, but by the time you
In
get
your
down
professional
here,
opinion.
there's erosion that's taking
So they
place.
did a good job in your eyes.
But they did
with
too
what they
much.
had. Well,
They
but
did the
that's because
$1,600
you're not
rate.
considering any safety, which they are.
They're considering safety, and that's the crux of the matter. I'm saying your regulations say you can't.
But what I'm saying is that I'm not looking at the safety. They told us they have to do that for safety. What we're saying is, what's the least that you can do to maintain the brook at the best quality? So if you have a better idea of how to manage that water with their plan, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, so-
That's what I'd love to hear from you, is what can we do to improve that plan?
And I really don't have a solution for here,
Okay?
because the problem is they're discharging this portion of the road and up to wherever the top is, on 5% slopes, which the guidelines say they can't do. By the way, do you need a general permit for dewatering? Well, when you go to the DEP, they're gonna say no.
We're not going to DEP for a general permit.
So you need a general permit for
This is
dewatering
the
and
permit we're
construction
going
activities?
for. We're going for the permit.
Do you need a general permit for construction and dewatering activities?
No.
See, that's the problem.
Why is that the
So
problem?
they're different citizenship in a sense. of-
No, the impact area is under 5,000.
Everyone else has to go get a general permit.
No,
No.
no. The impact area is under the regulated area of what is required for a stormwater discharge permit. That is not germane to this discussion.
There is no limited impact, limited.
Is it,
That was
what's the final, so, is,
So we're not getting any prudent alternatives or additional suggestions of a different scour hole that would be better,
Can we
or
just,
different
listen, it's
management?
getting late here, because we, please, if you'd like to further summarize this in the report, which we will read before we make our decision, I'll read it very carefully. I
You know, the
promise
part that
So we
really
wanna-
upsets me about this, Hank, is these are the kinds of questions. We have been deemed up here to make this decision, and we finally get the person who's supposedly the expert about the wetlands, and now because we've spent so much time picking and dealing with road speed, we don't even really have time to ask you specific questions about improvements to the design, which is
I
really
guess I'm
sad.
assuming his ideas are in the report, that's what I'm
But
assuming.
you know what, my questions aren't in the report. The answers to my questions probably aren't in the report.
Okay, what further questions do you have?
You know what,
Summarize.
at this point, none.
Okay.
So
You
you
know,
could
I
have
mean,
done
it's
something
like-
different here, so you wouldn't have to take out the bank. They'd have to figure out what to do with this 5% issue. And then as far as that is concerned, I actually would go with a larger scour hole. I would design it slightly differently, so that it had two cells. The first one will pick the sediment, and you'd be able to take the sediment out of there. And the second one would be vegetated. And we some revegetation that's going
So you
around.
would go with the second,
Something similar to the second one, which does have the water quality volume, the 444 cubic feet, that's what it says. But a first cell will be smaller, will be about 10% with some kind of a berm, so that most of the sediment that he said himself would only come off the road. That would be the area where it would be taken out. And the rest of it will be for the biofiltration portion of.
but you don't engineer scour holes, do you?
I can tell you a design that's in the stormwater quality manual, or something similar to that. The ultimate design would have to be in an engineer, because I can't do that.
But you would see a benefit to that type over just the first?
I would,
Yes.
I would,
I think
absolutely.
Okay, that's something positive that we can
I think when we look,
consider.
That's the kind of information that's helpful.
when we looked at it, I mean, I think all of us, I think all of us would like to see maximum water filtration if it were possible.
Yeah, exactly, within the scope of the project.
So, and I apologize because what you're saying is absolutely correct. But because of the way this thing worked out and the focus on safety and geometry and the horizontal, it's kind of been lost. And what I've been focusing on is there is a feasible alternative that will have less environmental impacts, long-term, short-term, without changing the replacement of the bridge as is. I like that, with the exception of the low-flow channel that we've had some arguments about, which I like to see that written out and put on the plan.
Dennis, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, I do. How many people that live in this town does this road service? How many of them live on the Massachusetts side of this culvert? How many people live on the Granby side of this culvert?
The Hartland section of the road is maybe 1/3 of the total length of Peck Orchard Road. Wade, you probably know better than
You
me.
mean, how many people does it serve, or is the length?
Well, as near as I can make out, this road is this is a small country road that's been abused. It's being used as a shortcut primarily by people from Massachusetts to go to Granby and go back home.
Can't help it.
And my question is this necessary to do? Why can't we just take this culvert out and make this into two dead-end roads? It would be a little bit inconvenient for the people who live on the north side, a little bit inconvenient. for the
We have
people who live on the
mutual
south
aid,
side.
we have mutual We have mutual aid through the fire departments and the police departments. I
I
think that
understand
safety
that.
during the winter storms, I mean, to me, that's.
There are state roads that make it fully accessible, both from Massachusetts and Connecticut,
Yes.
that are available. Route 57 and Route 189 are state roads that make it totally feasible to use. Just as the letter from the State Commission of Traffic in 1897 said.
Okay, listen, I sincerely apologize that we didn't ask you earlier to give your input, because I think it's very valuable. We will, as I said, read carefully what you reported. In 1 minute, is there some, or 2 minutes, is there something that you'd like to add to what you just said that might help us? Because this is the end of the public hearing.
I understand. From this side, you could do something similar to what I'm envisioning on this side. The problem is what they're doing now is they're discharging it down here, these steep slopes. Eventually, it's going to get to the wetland. There could be something similar where the water is brought along. Maybe they might have to use a structure and do some kind of a drop structure here that goes down to, again, another riprap scar hole. We don't have much of the opportunity here because it's steep. But they could bring it all the way here and more or less with a structure drop it directly into the brook.
So by structure, you mean piping it out, just learning.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I'd rather see that than see the trees and see this disturbance.
That's what I thought you meant on the other side, you meant an underground pipe for storm water.
Not so much, yeah, over here, no. A little riprap down to this place and then doing something in this location here. There's plenty of room. And then increasing the scar hole capacity and making it about more of a biofiltration area.
Thank you very much.
And she's going to say a couple of things and then we're...
Just very briefly, remember, even though it's a road, not a parking lot, there still is a lot of fine particulates that settle, and oils and engine wear stuff that settles on the road. So there are toxins that are either soluble or associated with very fine particles. And a scour hole with a natural bottom is much preferable to a catch basin because there is LID filtration through the soil. And I'm wondering, depending on what the soils are like, they may want to amend the bottoms of the swales and of the scour holes with sandier materials for better infiltration. And I'm still, I've built retaining walls on cut slopes by my own house, stone walls myself. And, the sort of the resign statement, it's impossible to reduce the width, to reduce the extent of the grading. You have to cut everything down behind the stone wall too. I think that with some skilled artisans from Mexico or whatever, one could do something that was that did work, that saved a lot of trees. And I would think that seeking the waiver of 22 feet from 24 feet really is worth it. That's a lot of impervious surface. That's a lot less volume. That's less frequency of maintaining the scour holes. And reducing the width to 22 and reducing the very large width of the swale, and that probably would take in a waiver as well, would allow, if not leaving this entirely alone, just cutting into it less so that there was still shading over the road.
Okay, well, thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much, and again, I apologize for, now I understand what you folks were, hopefully, from us.
Well, we have your report, and we'll cut your earlier testimony, your earlier reports, which we will.
The report is mostly just, summary of what was said.
Okay, that's perfect. So thank you very much. Excuse me.
Quick rebuttal? Quick rebuttal?
Yes, quick rebuttal, yes, sir.
I'd like to remind everybody that all we hear about is sheet flow occurring on this roadway right now, and that is clearly not the case. It's a very steep roadway. If you've looked in the brook, any of the areas, where we talked about points of curbing, there's uncontrolled blowouts of sediment that are going directly into that brook with all the toxins that we talked about, all that is going directly into the road right now, unintended. Nothing's touching it, okay? So to say that it's all sheet flowing off is just absolutely not the case if you've ever been out to the site at all, number one. Number two, in terms of the embankment and not touching the embankment, I think we showed them an alternative plan here that swings the road away from that embankment, does not touch the embankment, and what results in is far more actual wetland impacts. Okay, it goes from, what do we have for the main, 2,000 square feet up to 3,000 square feet
We
of
have
impact.
copies of these plans.
Yes, yes, so again, we looked at that and tried to save the embankment, all it does is cause more impact, okay? And then the other question is, I would be happy to look at, I think what you're referring to, George, is perhaps a 7-4 bay in our water treatment system there. We can certainly look at that as a way to keep the sediment where it's easily cleanable by the town, and we will definitely look at that as part of that. And then,
You're talking about a possible modification of your scour hole design?
correct.
Okay.
And we're more than happy, go
I
ahead.
just want to, reason we don't do that is because it's on private property. We can't sit there and design something that the state will look and say, we're not going to participate in that. We have to get direct permission from the town to proceed with that. And then we, of course, have to have compliance with the homeowners to be able to go and do that on their property. So
Well,
we
you
don't
have to get
necessarily
easement for that.
propose that.
Well, get an easement.
No, we have to get an easement for that, yeah. We don't present that typically to go
Right.
take people's private
We
property
understand
to
that.
do
All right,
that.
but it's doable. So
Yeah,
that's
it's not
But
doable.
we've already said that my family owns both sides of the road, and we
Right.
welcome your ideas.
right. So
We
again,
we can definitely
if
work.
we want to
with
treat
George
water
and
quality
Jessica.
volume, I suggest we go with a large basin. We can certainly put a 7-4 bay into that basin. I would like to comment that the basin's not just riprap, it is underlain by granular fill. We're really trying to promote infiltration of the water back into the ground. That's the first thing we try to do. So we're really,
Is the town willing to work in that direction?
Oh, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, we've always been willing.
so that's all I wanted to comment on right now.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else? I would like to call this public hearing to a close. Before I do so, I just want to make sure we've got everything, because after this point, we can't submit any more new information.
Yeah.
Just encourage you to read the report based on what you just said. This is
Okay.
We'd like to copy that report too, possibly.
I'll give you my copy.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that there are about 10 homesteads on the Peck Orchard Road, Hartland Road.
10 homesteads
10, maybe,
in
maybe
the
less.
Hartland part of the road.
Right.
Okay. All
That
right.
includes Granby and,
No,
just
not
Hartland.
including Granby.
just in Hartland.
What is it, subdivision?
Maybe.
Which
There's
side of the
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 8, I don't know. But there, 8, yeah.
No, I
don't even
think there's closer to 10.
I don't think so. There's 4 in the subdivision.
You got yours?
There's
and
one
yours.
across the street, it's 5. There's me, my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, that's 8.
Was Hensler in there? or-
There's no other homesteads.
How
It's
about
all
the
rural, PA 490 land, and state forest.
The two across the street from here? too?
Yeah, I included that one too, that's
There's
the
two
prefab
across.
house. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know about the brass house, I don't know if they're in Heartland or not.
Yeah, they're.
All right, with that, I would like to adjourn this public hearing at 10:13 p.m. on the 5th of January.
I'll second.
Thank you for your time. Sorry to cause you such discomfort.